My cousin falsely accused me of physical coercion. 10 years later, my family finally reached out to me. I grew up in what was probably an ordinary family. My parents worked a lot but always made time to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We weren't especially close as a family, but we didn't have major problems either. The same could be said for our extended relatives. They always lived a few hours away, but we'd see each other during summer or Christmas, and it was always cordial. As we grew older, we naturally drifted apart because everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now, but when I was 22 and in university, my mum called me and that call changed my life. I remember not answering at first because I was playing with friends, but she immediately called back. In our family, there was an unspoken rule. If someone calls twice, it's serious, maybe even an emergency. So I apologized to my friends and answered. On the other end was chaos. People seemed to be arguing. When my mum realized I'd picked up, she went into another room and closed the door. I asked what was happening and heard her crying. The conversation is hazy in my memory, but she asked if I wanted to confess to something regarding my cousin. She was 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. I hadn't seen her for several years. I simply said no and asked what she meant. Mum started sobbing even harder and accused me of doing something inappropriate to E when we were children. She said he had told my sister, who then told Mum and my aunt. According to them, when he was 9 and I was 16, she was playing in my room and I allegedly made unwanted contact and kissed her. Mum kept demanding I admit it, but I couldn't say a word. It was absurd. I thought it must be a horrible joke. The last thing I remember is telling her it wasn't true, that he was lying. But Mum kept pressing, saying he had described in detail exactly where and how it supposedly happened. She kept asking, "You did it, didn't you?" And each time I yelled, "No," it ended with Mum putting us on speakerphone and both she and Dad saying they didn't want anything to do with me anymore and that I should never contact them. 2 of my sisters later texted me that I was disgusting, then blocked my number. I know it sounds strange, but after that call, I went into the shower and just stood under the water. I still don't know why I did that. When I calmed down, I tried calling and texting everyone, even E, but no one responded. Those who hadn't blocked me quickly did. The only reply I received was a message from my father asking me not to contact him, saying they needed time to heal. That was 9 years ago, and since then, I haven't spoken to anyone in my family. Saying it broke me is an understatement. I spent weeks in a fog, barely eating. This all happened right before my thesis defense, and I was already at my limit. Thankfully, my CO author noticed something was wrong and helped by taking over much of the exam, leaving me only the easiest questions. Without that, I definitely would have failed. Of course, no one from my family came to my graduation. Then began the worst period of my life. For the first year, I expected the police to show up at my door daily to arrest me for the accusations. I couldn't find a job and lived off my savings. I sang a lot and I became increasingly bitter and aggressive. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone was that no one was around. Once a neighbor called the police when I accidentally broke a glass, but I convinced them it was just an accident and they left since no one else was in the apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent nights imagining how I could harm her without anyone ever finding out. I even thought about doing to her what she accused me of, only on a much larger scale. I know that's horrible and I'm not proud of it. A year later, I got my first real job in my field. That's when things started to improve. I focused entirely on work because it was the only thing that gave me a sense of normalcy, a way to immerse myself and forget everything else. Recovery was slow, but I drank less, smiled more, lived modestly, and earned good money. I treated myself with gifts like a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego sets, and so on. Last year, I finally bought a small house and moved out of my tiny apartment. I had always dreamed of having a garage and a garden to tend, and having them gave me more strength. Now my life is more or less in order, but the problems persist. I've been on antidepressants for several years. While they help, they don't make me happy. They simply replace dark thoughts with emptiness. My faith in people has practically died. I tried dating, but over all these years, I've only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's incredibly hard to talk to anyone like a normal person when it comes to relationships. What am I supposed to say if a potential partner asks about my family? You know, They accused me of a terrible crime, and we don't talk anymore, but I didn't do it. Honest, mostly I work with men, so the only woman I actually talk to regularly is my therapist, and I really like her. A few days ago, I got a message from my mum. At first, I was scared to open it. I just stared at the notification for hours before finally looking. Yesterday, a second message arrived. In short, the first one said, "Hi, it's been so long since we last spoke. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." She wrote at length about my sisters, how my nieces and nephews have grown. I didn't even know I'd become an uncle, and ended with, "We love you and always will. Love, Mum and Dad." The second message said, "We understand you probably don't want to talk to us after everything that happened, but please hear us out. Last month, during a family gathering, he started downplaying what she said happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and maybe she dreamt it. We were all shocked. When we last spoke with you, we thought we were protecting her and doing the right thing. We know that doesn't excuse how we treated you. What he did was wrong, and we're all angry at her. We've called everyone who knew and told the truth. We all want to talk to you, and your sisters want you to meet them and their families. Please write if you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Love, Mum and Dad." That's the situation. I haven't replied yet, but they probably know I read it. Honestly, I'm furious. I don't want to forgive them, and I can't guarantee I won't explode if I'm in the same room with them. Part of me wants to call them and unleash all my anger, make them feel the weight of everything I went through, and then dedicate my life to making my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part of me wants to just ignore them and continue living my more or less normal life with my motorcycle and my garden, which keep me company. I have no friends. The only people I talk to are my co-workers, and we're not particularly close. I called my therapist, but she's on vacation for a few more weeks. I don't want to talk to anyone else. That leaves only you strangers on the internet. Please? What should I do? Ignore them and keep living as I am, or reply? And if I reply, what should I even say? I'm almost certain that meeting them in person anytime soon would be a bad idea. I'm not sure my life would get better if I tried to restore those old connections. It's embarrassing to admit, but I dreamed of the day they'd apologize, imagining them falling to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Text apologies feel insanely weak compared to what they put me through. Consider yourself lucky that I didn't end up 6 feet under back then. My parents and sisters, that's one thing, but you. I will never forgive you for the irreparable damage you caused me. Burn in hell and never contact me again. She didn't reply, but I could see the message was read. Maybe she got the hint and decided not to answer. The good news is I also responded to my parents. Nothing harsh in the messages, because we discussed everything over the phone. It was weird to hear their voices again. I used to associate their voices with safety at home, but after everything, it felt completely different. At first, it hurt like hell. All the bitter memories of our last conversation came rushing back, the same voices, yelling at me for things I didn't even do. The call lasted about 3-4 hours. It was hard for me, and probably for them too, but it ended up being the most productive conversation I've ever had with them. I expected a lot of excuses like ease, but to my surprise, they not only apologized 1,000 times, they also acknowledged all their mistakes. They said they had felt awful all this time, and now that the truth was out, didn't know how to move forward. The hardest moment was when I asked why they hadn't believed me their own son instead of taking my niece's word. They said it had been unbelievably difficult. He had been so convincing that they felt they had no choice. I told them that, instead of completely cutting ties, they could have at least tried to help me, but they didn't give me a chance. They said they understood that and that it had been the hardest thing they'd ever done. A year or two after the break, they wanted to reach out and try to fix things, but ultimately decided that, knowing me, I wouldn't talk to them and it would just make things worse. That annoyed me a little. What difference did it make who I was? First and foremost, I'm your son, and that's what matters most. In the end, we agreed to stay in touch. I'm not visiting them yet, but it's a start. Despite the lingering anger in my heart, I feel that things can get better, and that gives me some satisfaction. Since that call, we've been talking regularly, and our conversations are slowly starting to feel like they used to. Maybe someday I'll visit them, but I don't know when or how it will go. How do you hug people who just threw you out of their lives? Final update, 5 months later, and this time I have more good news than bad. First, many people suggested I take you to court to hold her accountable. While I agree that what she did was unforgivable and terrible, I don't think it would achieve anything good. This dragged on for 10 years, and I just want it to end. Suing her would cost thousands in legal fees, which I can't afford, and I can't stop thinking that she never actually tried to take it to court herself. Not the best justification, I know, but the thought lingers. I'm still in touch with my parents, and believe it or not, I actually visited them about a week ago. They've also cut contact with E, and I think she's now experiencing what I went through, a sort of punishment similar to a court case. The visit went well. I haven't seen other relatives yet because I want the process to be gradual. With my parents, we met and had dinner in the past. I wasn't sure how meeting them would go, how I could greet people who destroyed my normal life, but it went better than expected. I thought anger would overwhelm me, but instead I felt some relief when I saw them. It was strange. Maybe their presence restored a sense of normality. I didn't hug them until the conversation ended, which was heavy and intense. I didn't want to hurt them, but I needed them to understand how deeply they had hurt me. At one point, my mum started crying as I detailed the darkest moments of my life. They acknowledged that nothing could be changed, but they want the future to be more positive. They even invited me home for Christmas to meet the relatives, but I told them I plan to take things slowly and will consider their offer. Although I still feel conflicted, the hatred is gradually fading, and overall, I feel much better. I think the weight of this situation dragged me down for 10 years, and now, freed from judgment, it feels like a relief. I've also started dating a wonderful woman, and our relationship is gradually becoming more serious. Life is improving. Who knows what the next 10 years will bring, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like things are heading upward. To anyone who read my story, I hope my situation shows that any problem or conflict can eventually be resolved, even if it takes 10 years. I worked in a small plumbing service branch that handled both residential and commercial jobs, plus emergencies. There were originally 3 of us dispatchers in the office, covering scheduling, invoicing, ordering parts, and basically keeping the place running. Headquarters managed payroll, accounting, and bigger admin tasks. My colleagues were Howard, an old-timer who worked early mornings Monday through Thursday and lived with his elderly parents, and Ashley, a single mum juggling 3 kids and a million family obligations. My own schedule was later, 11 o'clock to 7:30, which suited me fine since I covered after-hours emergency calls. For a while things ran smoothly until Ashley blew everything up. Payroll noticed that one technician's hours were always inflated, and after some digging, it turned out she was sleeping with him and padding his timesheets. Their little side hustle came out when a customer called for warranty service we had no record of, because the guy had been doing off-the-books jobs for cash. Emails and GPS logs confirmed everything. They were both fired on the spot. That left just me and Howard to keep the branch afloat. Corporate promised a replacement soon and set up a temporary schedule. Howard worked his usual mornings through Thursday, sometimes stretching later, and I covered Wednesday through Sunday, plus all after-hours calls. Neither of us could take vacation because there was literally no one to cover. A couple of weeks later, corporate dropped a new character into the mix, Sven. His job was supposedly to clean up the administrative chaos, missing orders, incomplete reports, overdue invoices, and also step in as dispatcher if needed. From the moment he walked in, I knew I couldn't stand him. Loud, arrogant, constantly swearing, acting like he'd been brought in to fix us. But in truth, I didn't care because the stuff he was assigned was exactly the crap I didn't want anyway. Dealing with suppliers, chasing parts, filing payroll, and arguing with vendors. If he wanted to play the boss, let him, and this is where I leaned into malicious compliance. I did exactly what was written in my contract, no more, no less. I kept my shift, answered emergency calls, scheduled jobs during my hours, and made sure nothing on my plate fell through. Meanwhile, Sven, in his infinite arrogance, started messing with the system, trying to streamline processes he didn't understand. I didn't argue. I let him. If he wanted to take responsibility for things outside my scope, great. Every mistake he made landed on his desk, not mine. Howard wasn't going to fight him either. He was too close to retirement to care. I knew exactly what was happening. Sven thought he was making himself indispensable, but in reality, he was digging his own hole. The best part, Because I stuck strictly to my contract, my work hours, and my defined responsibilities, I was bulletproof. Headquarters saw that I kept the branch running during my assigned times, while Sven's blunders piled up elsewhere. I collected my paycheck, stayed out of the drama, and even managed to line up side income by quietly collaborating with one of our competitors, feeding them tips and routing overflow jobs when we couldn't cover. I was getting paid twice, once by my employer for doing the bare minimum and again under the table from the competition. This went on for months. Howard stayed invisible, Sven burned every bridge he crossed, and I kept cashing checks while doing as little as possible. In the end, Sven's temper finally exploded in front of the wrong person at HQ, and he was shown the door. By then, I had pocketed almost a year's worth of easy money while playing both sides, and no one ever pinned a single mistake on me. Malicious compliance at its finest. I followed the rules, did only what I had to, let the loudmouth sink himself, and profited the whole way through. Putting up with his nonsense for a few hours, 3 days a week, was tolerable, so I let it slide. We only overlapped in the office Wednesday through Friday from 11 to 5, and once he left, the atmosphere became bearable again. Twice I tried to request vacation after he started, and both times I was denied. Keep in mind, my contract guaranteed me 3 weeks off per year, and before his arrival, I had only taken 2 days back in spring. Fast forward to late November, Sven was becoming unbearable. He got under my skin so badly I was on the edge of losing it. I'm not proud to admit, I have anger issues, and it was taking everything in me not to plant my fist in his smug face. The breaking point came when I checked my paycheck and noticed I was short 5 hours. I wasn't only paid for my scheduled shifts, but also for emergency calls after hours, which usually added up to 46 minus 50 hours weekly, with overtime kicking in after 44. Those missing 5 hours, all overtime. I confronted Sven on payday, asking for an explanation. He smugly told me corporate had ordered him to eliminate overtime, and if I checked my email, I'd see the directive forbidding anyone in the office from working beyond their scheduled hours. Of course, this policy only affected me since Howard barely worked 38 hours a week and never covered emergencies. So why was I short? Sven claimed he deducted 30 minutes daily for lunch breaks. Except, I didn't take lunch breaks. I ate a sandwich at my desk while working. His response? Doesn't matter. Legally, I can deduct 30 minutes per day as unpaid mealtime. If you don't like it, file a complaint with the Labour Board. Now shut up and get back to your damn desk. That was it. Touch my money and you've crossed a line. He was going. To regret this, I called up my old friend Eric, a lawyer at one of the city's top firms, and invited him out Sunday night for beers and wings. Amazing how much legal advice you can get for the price of chicken and a pitcher of IPA. By Monday, I had a plan. I drove across town to a spy shop, bought a little gadget easy enough to find if you know where to look, and by that afternoon, I was ready. 10 minutes into using it, Sven stormed out into the parking lot demanding to know what I was doing. Having lunch, I replied calmly. He exploded, phones were ringing off the hook. Jeff needed to process a credit card. Mike was finishing a job. Chaos everywhere. He wanted me back in the office immediately. I shrugged. Sorry, Sven. You don't pay me for breaks, so I'm not working during them. Either you handle it or wait 17 more minutes. Then I rolled up my car window and enjoyed the silence. Watching his face turn red as he stomped back inside was pure bliss. When I returned, he cornered me again. Furious. I told him flat out, you deduct 30 minutes from my timesheet. Fine, I'm taking 30 minutes. That's my legal right. He had no comeback. 5 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox ordering me to take my lunch at PM so I'd be back before Howard clocked out. I replied politely, BCCing the company owner and HR, explaining that labour law prohibits employers from forcing a break within the first 5 hours of a shift. Therefore, I'd continue to take mine at PM exactly as the law allowed. To really drive the point home, I attached the relevant section from the Department of Labour's website. He later stormed into my office, yelling again, but I just repeated, everything I'm doing is legal. If you've got a problem, take it. Up with the Labour Board. On Thursday, right after he left for the day, I fired off another email again copying HR and the owner. I agreed that I had voluntarily adjusted my hours to cover gaps until a third dispatcher was hired and trained. But now that Sven was fully up to speed, I was withdrawing my consent to work outside my contracted schedule. Starting Monday, I would be back to the hours written in my contract. Friday morning, I walked into the office at AM, and there was Sven, waiting with a printout of my email. Within minutes, both HR and the owner were on the phone, demanding to know what the hell was happening. I calmly explained, when I was hired, my schedule was explicitly defined in my contract Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock to 4:30. The only reason it changed was a temporary verbal agreement to keep the office afloat. Now that the situation had changed, I was rescinding that agreement. From next week, I was reverting to my original contractual hours. No way in hell was I going to work on the old schedule until he allowed it. My hours were clearly stated in the contract, and that's the law. If he wanted to change it, fine, but then I'd want a raise as well. What followed was a storm of emails. He'd send me orders, and I'd reply with HR and the owner copied in. I kept working through Sunday as usual, and on Monday I clocked in at a M. Howard, asked what was going on because that's what I called him, had been losing his mind and yelling about me nonstop. Here's the thing, good dispatchers in this business are rare. You can find people for trucking, taxes, or towing, but balancing plumbers with demanding clients, that's tough. I had built a strong relationship with all the plumbers, and naturally, they started asking questions. I stayed neutral and didn't spill much. By midday, I sent Pig an email asking how long I should stay for the late calls. His reply, until the jobs are done. Perfect. That night I worked until 6:30, Tuesday until 7 o'clock, and the same on Wednesday. Each day I kept the email trail alive, copying management, so everything was on record. By Thursday morning, I'd already logged 39.5 hours 38 in the office and 1.5 on after hours calls. Around AM, I wrote another email with HR and the boss in CC, carefully explaining my hours and pointing out that by 12:30, I'd hit 44 hours. Since Pig's own memo forbade any overtime, I'd have no choice but to leave early. Before hitting send, I turned to Howard and joked, might be time to grab some popcorn. Not 5 minutes later, Pig stormed into the office, red-faced and furious, demanding to know what the hell I was doing. I calmly told him, I'm just following your orders, no overtime, remember? At 12:30, I'll be over 44 hours. Either you lift the ban or I clock out. Your choice. He was trapped. His instructions were on record. Either he let me go home or he'd have to pay me overtime for the rest of the week, or worse, cover dispatch himself over the weekend. He cursed, threatened, and raged, but I stood my ground. Fine, I said, put it in writing. And just so you know, I can't work Sunday. It's illegal to deny me a day off. I worked last Sunday, and the law guarantees me at least one rest day per week. Pig was livid. His kid had a tournament that Sunday, and now he'd have to either cover the shift himself or break the law in front of our. Watching him squirm was pure satisfaction. By the following Monday, November 26th, I walked into the office to find HR, the owner, and Pig waiting for me. HR and the boss wanted answers. Pig had been painting me as insubordinate and threatening to quit, pushing hard to fire me even though just 2 weeks earlier I'd been considered one of their best employees. I calmly explained everything and pointed to the email threads where both HR and the owner had been copied. When they asked what started all this, I laid it out. Pig had deducted hours I had legitimately worked, forced me to skip breaks, and tried to push through illegal changes to my schedule. The owner shot him a nasty look and said flatly, I never told you to cut overtime. They asked if I was willing to return to my old hours. I told them we can discuss it, but that would be a significant change to my contract. That means renegotiating, including my pay rate. They suggested I just go back first and then set up a meeting. I shook my head. No thanks. Meeting first, agreement second, then you get your new hours. They promised to think it over, but I reminded them time was running out. I'd already booked the last 3 weeks of December for vacation. Pig lost it right in front of them, screaming, like hell you are. You don't take a single damn day off unless I approve it, and I don't approve a minute. I turned calmly to HR and the owner. According to labor law, I'm entitled to annual leave. My contract guarantees me 3 weeks a year, and so far I've only used 2 days. I requested vacation twice, and Pig denied both. Since Ashley was fired and Pig was hired, I couldn't take time off because there were only 2 of us left in the office. The law is on my side, and the year's almost over. The owner looked like he wanted to strangle Pig right there. Use It or lose it. So I did. Cha said, we'll pay you for unused vacation. I looked at her and replied, no, I don't accept that. I have the right to take my vacation, not cash out. She paused a moment and said, we'll roll it. Over to next year. I shook my head. No, I am entitled to my vacation this year, not next. Pig tried to intervene, but Howard already had 2 weeks booked. I told them I'm going to Florida with my family. You can't stop me. They said, you're going to Florida? That means you expect me to run the office alone, 7 days a week, while you send emails forbidding overtime? I turned to the owner and Cha. Listen, I worked all year. Labor law says I have the right to vacation. You can't deny me my earned time off just because you're going on vacation. He grumbled, but I didn't budge, forcing me to wait until a third employee was hired. That third person was here. I was taking my vacation, no deferrals. If you want to renegotiate my contract, we can do that after the new year. Then I walked out. I don't know how the rest of the meeting went, but about an hour later, Pig was on my case again, screaming about losing $1,000 and telling his kids they couldn't go to Disney. He called me every insult imaginable. The next 2 weeks were pure hell. Pig acted like a maniac, claiming I was the worst person he'd ever worked with. I took my vacation anyway, didn't go anywhere, just relaxed and spent time with my parents over the holidays. When I returned in January, a new employee was in my seat. Pig, looking smug, handed me termination papers. Cha said I had been laid off, allegedly for some fault of mine. That actually worked in my favor where I live. If someone calls a former employer for a reference, all they can legally confirm is the length of employment and eligibility for rehire. A few days later, Pig got a call. Hi Pig, this is Eric. We're reviewing the author's resume. You're listed as his last employer. Can you speak about him? Pig went off like dynamite, calling me every insult, lying about absences, fabricating stories. I said, Pig, do you recognize my voice? He froze. Yes, I know your voice. Are you a lawyer? Yes, Pig, I'm a lawyer's client. That call came from their conference room. We eventually set up a meeting with the owner, HR, Pig, the owner's lawyer, and Eric. Eric explained, I was filing a wrongful termination claim and that the meeting was to discuss potential settlement. We presented everything, emails, chronological events, and the highlight audio recordings of Pig screaming, threatening, and ranting. It was glorious. Pig turned pale. The owner looked like he wanted to erase him from existence. After a short break, they came back and offered 3-month severance if I signed a release. Eric smiled and refused. They played the conference audio. We also had 2 colleagues ready to give written testimony. They increased the offer to 6 months. We proposed 2 years. Eventually, we settled on 15 months, paid bi-weekly as if I was still working. Based on my average hours over the last 6 months, I had accumulated significant overtime. They even tried to add a clause preventing me from working in the same industry during the agreement, but Eric insisted it be removed. My skills were in demand. I quickly found a new job doing the same work, but now for one of their competitors. I'm earning simultaneously from both companies, saving money. Eric didn't demand a huge fee. Pig got fired quickly, and thanks to me and the owner's network. Rumors effectively blacklisted him from employment. Last I heard, he's still looking. I told my new employer to discard any of his resumes if they ever show up. And if anyone ever calls asking for a reference about Pig, all I'll say is that I worked with him for 4 months in 2018 and nothing more. Everything fully legal. They tried to pressure me into joining the HOA, and I eventually agreed, but not in the way they expected. This is a story about a property I own and rent out. Strangely enough, I don't think I could actually afford to live there myself now, as the area has become pretty upscale. The story doesn't take place in the Uz, but in South Africa, though for your convenience, I've converted all the amounts from local currency into US dollars. Backstory, many years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm had been divided up, but before any real development in the area had begun. The plot I purchased was near the back entrance, which connected to a dirt road. The more expensive plots were located closer to the paved road at the front. Originally, I bought a large piece of land intending to farm it, but that never happened. Around 20 years ago, a group of landowners, let's call them the organised owners, pushed to have the area designated as a municipal suburb. The municipality agreed to put in paved roads, water and electricity if a certain percentage of owners built homes. A construction company connected with the OO offered to build houses for those who had land, but no buildings at a very affordable price, provided they signed up enough owners. Around that time, one of the OO offered to buy half my land. I agreed, and the money I made from the sale about 4 times what I had paid for the entire property plus a small bank loan allowed me to build a fairly large and beautiful house. I lived there for a few years, and my mother eventually moved in with me. I decided to split the land again and build her a house next to mine. Sadly, she passed away from a late diagnosed tumor before construction could begin. Soon after her death, we moved out of the house and started renting it out. Just weeks before we left the OO, I had sold land to begin discussing creating a homeowners association HOA. I wasn't interested and left. About 2 years later, another OO neighbor contacted me. By then, the area had 2 paved entrances, the original farm road near the old farmhouse that connected to a busy main road, and my back entrance, which had been paved and now connected to a wide but not too busy municipal road. The HOA wanted to close the old farm road for safety reasons and to reduce through traffic, which meant the road next to my property would become the main, in fact, the only entrance. They pressured me to join the HOA, but I firmly said no. Eventually, they gave up, but then said they wanted to put up a welcome sign at the edge of my property and build a small guard hut to monitor traffic. We made a deal. They could use the land if they mowed my lawn and paid me about $35 a month. I was thrilled since the area wasn't small, and it didn't cost them anything extra. They already had gardening services for the HOA. That was over 10 years ago. The HOA eventually succeeded in closing the other road, so now they pay for security right next to my property, mow my lawn, and give me a monthly payment enough to buy takeout for the whole family a couple of times. Occasionally, someone from the HOA still contacts me to try and convince me to join, but I've never been interested. My property has been rented to the same tenant for years, and everything has gone smoothly. The problems begin about 3 years ago. Trouble started. Someone was scaring my tenant's young daughter by making strange noises and even firing gunshots near her window 3 or 4 times in a month. This frightened my tenant, and I suspect it also scared the HOA because both my tenant and the HOA approached me with an offer. They said I could join the HOA, but I wouldn't have to follow their rules or pay monthly fees. On top of that, they wanted to build an electric fence with security cameras around the entire neighborhood. They claimed they had wanted to do this for a while but didn't want to build a fence across land not technically in the HOA. I didn't see any downside, and agreed. The fence was completed within a year, which was surprisingly quick. But just a month after construction finished, my tenant received a warning from the HOA about his dogs barking. He told them that while the property was within HOA grounds, it had been exempted from their rules. The HOA replied that they had revoked that exemption and gave him 30 days to fix the issue. My tenant contacted me, and I finally opened the mail I had been ignoring, assuming I wasn't bound by any HOA rules or fees. That's when I got a nasty surprise. They retroactively annulled the exemptions and demanded that I pay overdue fees for the past year, cancel the easement agreement allowing them to use part of my land for the security booth, and return the money they had already paid me. On top of that, they wanted me to pay for the gardeners who had been mowing my lawn, and also pay fines for every violation my tenant didn't fix. A costly legal battle began with lawyers involved. In the end, the judge ruled that the HOA's actions were mostly legal. They had the right to cancel the exemptions, but they were required to give me 30 days notice. As I was walking to my car, the neighbor from the organized owners group, the same guy who had bought half my land years ago and was now the HOA president, smirked and told me I was stupid for not joining the HOA from the very beginning. According to him, I could have been a founder, whatever that meant. He also said next time I should read contracts more carefully before signing them. That little comment stuck with me. When I got home, I pulled out the HOA contract, determined to find a loophole and break every rule if I could. I didn't even get past the first page before I discovered something. The HOA had identified my property by its address, but legally, land is defined by its cadastral number. Years ago, when my mother moved in with me, I had split my property into 2 lots, one for me and one for her. But construction on her lot never began. When I signed the original easement allowing the HOA to use part of my land for the guard booth, that agreement technically applied only to her small lot. The HOA had recorded the cadastral number for that little parcel without realizing it wasn't my main property, which meant my main lot, the big one, legally wasn't even part of the HOA. The next day, the HOA president personally delivered 2 documents to me, and I signed to acknowledge receipt. One stated that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and the other cancelled the easement agreement in 30 days. I suspect he thought he was being clever because I lived an hour away and it would be hard for me to react in time. Revenge, exactly. 30 days later, I knocked on the HOA president's door and handed him 2 documents of my own. The first declared that I intended to build a house on the lot that was technically inside the HOA, the small parcel, which clearly confused him. The second stated that they had 30 days to remove the guard booth, the gate barrier, and the welcome sign from my land. He tried to start a conversation, but I ignored him, got in my car, and drove away. The next morning, I got a call from the ho's lawyer. He insisted that their structures would remain on my property since they were built on an unused part of the land. I told him I was building a house, so the land would no longer be unused. I could actually hear him smirk as he said the court would never recognize my construction as legitimate. I smirked right back and told him the plot was just big enough for a small house and suggested he double-check the cadastral number. It took them 5 days to finally realize the truth. My property was actually 2 separate legal parcels. Soon, their lawyer called again, this time claiming that the easement couldn't be cancelled without their approval. In response, I sent him a photo of their own official document, the one they had issued, cancelling the easement themselves. That same week, the HOA president invited me out to lunch, his treat, to talk it over. I declined. 2 days later, he tried again. I declined again. Then other members of the organised owners started reaching out, some aggressively, some trying to be sympathetic. My answer was the same to everyone: no, thanks. 9 days before the 30-day deadline, I received a call from another lawyer, this one trying to convince me to surrender. His words, not mine. I agreed to meet. At the meeting, I handed in my prepared documents. My new easement proposal included everything from the old contract, but with major changes. The HOA would now be required to bring the lot up to HOA standards and maintain it since it was technically within their jurisdiction. The easement fee was increased from 35 month to 500 month, adjusted annually for inflation. If the agreement were ever terminated, they would owe me $7,500 in compensation, and, most importantly, the contract would automatically terminate in 30 days if any disciplinary action was taken against me, any complaints were filed against my property, or if the HOA filed any kind of legal case against me, my tenant, or my land. And remember, all this applied only to the small parcel. The lawyer wasn't happy. He called it an unfair proposal, but admitted he'd pass it along to the HOA president. I reminded him that in just over a week, I would send in a construction crew with power tools to start dismantling everything they had built on my land. That evening, I got a furious call from the HOA president. He swore he'd never sign my new contract. I just replied, okay. He tried to negotiate the easement fee back down to the original 35 month, but I pointed out that when I signed that deal, the neighborhood was undeveloped with multiple access roads. Now, the only functioning entry was through my land and the area was fully built up. He said I was forcing them into a contract they didn't want to sign. I told him they were free not to sign it. In the end, he said their lawyer would contact me. The next morning, the lawyer called and asked me to come in and sign the contract. When I arrived, I found out the lawyer was actually just a paralegal, basically a legal assistant without a license to practice, someone who can't even appear in court. He handed me the contract, and I said I needed to read it first to make sure nothing had been changed. The paralegal laughed and said, of course, I read it carefully. Not a single change. The HOA president had signed it, and the paralegal added his own signature as a witness. I was honestly surprised he went through with it. It was such a stupid move. The paralegal shrugged and said, I tried to tell him it was a bad idea, but he told me, you're not paid to think or give advice. You're paid to shut up and do what I say. So I shut up. I asked him if he understood what the president had actually signed. He nodded. I suggested they at least let a real attorney review it, but he admitted they'd already billed too many hours and the president just wanted it done. His plan was to sign, then later sue me and try to get the easement back. That was about a year and a half ago. 6 months later, the HOA finally realized what kind of trap they'd signed themselves into. They wanted to sue me, but their attorneys told them straight up they couldn't win. The best outcome they could hope for was to have the easement annulled. But even that wasn't guaranteed, because the court would see that they themselves had signed off on every clause. The lawyers were especially alarmed by one particular clause, that the HOA would cover all of my legal expenses in case of any lawsuit against me. The contract didn't specify only lawsuits related to the HOA, which meant that if literally anyone sued me, a neighbor, a contractor, a stranger, the HOA was on the hook to pay my lawyer. The attorneys tried to argue that no judge would enforce that, but I told them flat out, I'm ready to find out. Because the only people who'd even challenge that clause would be you guys, and you'd have to sue me first. In the end, I signed an amendment. If the HOA president ever stepped down or left the HOA, he would still personally be responsible for covering all of my legal fees. And if the HOA itself sued me, then both he and the HOA would be liable. Guess what? He resigned at the very first meeting. I politely told him in front of everyone that maybe it wasn't the smartest move to sign documents you don't fully understand. He didn't look amused during mediation. It also came out that without the ability to control access to the neighborhood through the guard shack, which, remember, was partially sitting on my land, the HOA would technically be in violation of their own charter, which meant they could actually be dissolved. Another thing I learned, and honestly, I should have realized this earlier, all the security cameras were wired, and every single wire ran through that guard shack. So yeah, the hoe's entire existence basically depended on me. A few months back, I built a small dog pool for the neighborhood. Dug the hole myself, lined it with stone, poured the concrete. My first attempt, and to be honest, it looked awful. The HOA called a meeting and declared that the pool was an eyesore. I asked them to give me a written list of what exactly needed to be fixed so I could review it at the next meeting. The list was ridiculous. Basically, it demanded a complete rebuild. I asked if there was any cheaper way to bring it up to HOA standards. They said no. So I thanked them, pulled out my copy of the contract, highlighted the clause that said the HOA was responsible for maintaining my property to its standards, handed them their own list back, and told them, usually, you guys prefer to resolve this sort of thing within 30 days, right? They started arguing until the mediator reminded them they couldn't force me to comply without cancelling the easement altogether. So, of course, they agreed to do it themselves, and today I found out something new about my neighbour from the HOA, the same guy who'd been at the centre of this whole mess. Turns out he sold his house 3 months ago and is moving to Australia. Apparently the HOA successfully sued him for a massive sum to cover the losses they took during his war against me. Yeah, apparently he'd had a personal vendetta against me all along. I still have no idea what I ever did to piss him off at this point. I'm not sure if I'll keep making life difficult for the HOA. The only thing keeping them from cancelling the agreement is the enormous financial hit they'd take if they did, and honestly, I kind of like the monthly payments, so I'm motivated to play nice. In the end, the neighbor wasn't wrong after all. My parents took my sister on a vacation instead of me. She ruined the family trip and got arrested. Now they finally saw her true nature. I'm 23, a girl, and I have a younger sister, Liza, who is 18. I'm convinced she is the literal embodiment of evil. For many years, I tried to convince my parents to see the truth, but they didn't listen, at least until recently. For context, I've always had a tense relationship with my parents. The reason is simple. They adore her because my mum had a miscarriage and losing a child affected her deeply. Liza, born a few years later, became a miraculous symbol of hope and joy that helped them cope with the loss. My parents literally showered her with attention and love, making her the center of our family universe. I want to clarify that I loved my younger sister when we were children. However, over time, I began to realize that Liza has an incredible talent for manipulation, and no one in the family noticed. She could turn any situation to her advantage and masterfully play the victim. Once, on my birthday, my grandparents gave me a stunning antique pocket watch. I was thrilled as my grandmother explained it was a family heirloom. Naturally, Liza turned green with envy and constantly asked me to share it. I refused as it was my birthday gift. She tried to convince my parents, but they could do nothing, since the gift came from my grandparents. That night, knowing that I'm terrified of spiders, she put a spider under my pillow so I would find it when I went to bed. I woke up to the horrible sensation of a spider crawling on me and started screaming. My concerned parents ran to my room. Liza pretended to be surprised and caring, but later, when we were alone, she admitted with a nasty smirk that she put the spider there to teach me a lesson. I was shocked at how easily she admitted it with no hint of remorse. Another incident happened when I had a crush on my classmate Mark. I finally dared to invite him over to watch a movie. I was very nervous and carefully picked out a dress to make a good impression, but as soon as Mark arrived, Liza deliberately spilled a glass of juice on my dress and started laughing at me. I was horrified and had to change, trying to hide my embarrassment. As if that wasn't enough, Liza started telling Mark humiliating stories from my childhood, making me feel extremely embarrassed. She wouldn't let us spend time alone during the movie. When Mark left, Liza smirked and told him he could find someone better. Mark, who felt uncomfortable all evening, left quickly. I simply couldn't believe how cruel and cunning my younger sister could be. For many years, I repeatedly told my parents about her misbehavior, but they always brushed it off as youthful naivety. They simply couldn't see her true nature. When I complained, they just dismissed me. Liza became their favorite, and I felt more and more like an outsider in my own family. I focused on my studies and got into a good university, which allowed me to move out and start a better life. However, every time I returned home for breaks, Liza made it clear that she hated my presence. She intentionally ignored me, refused to engage in even the simplest conversations during family meals, avoided sitting near me, or interrupted me when I spoke to my parents. Her constant attempts to belittle me proved that she hated my presence and did everything she could to make my visits unpleasant. Liza even ruined my things under the pretense of borrowing them, ultimately breaking or losing them. When I complained, my parents paid little attention and only asked us to get along. Eventually, I started avoiding trips home during breaks, making excuses to spend the time with my college friends. Honestly, my parents barely objected and chalked it up to me becoming independent and wanting to spend time away from home. When Liza finished high school, she didn't have enough grades to enter a university, so she went to a local college. She didn't have to move away from our parents. Currently, I work for a large international corporation in San Francisco and genuinely enjoy my job. I sometimes keep in touch with my parents but rarely visit home. I don't speak to Liza at all. Now, to the main point, recently, my father had a near-fatal heart attack. Luckily, by some miracle, he survived and was rushed to the hospital. When my mum called to tell me, I immediately booked a flight to be with him. The doctors prescribed him multiple medications and strongly recommended he start exercising. After his discharge, my father expressed a desire to spend more time with the family and said how lucky he was to have survived. I understood where his thoughts came from, so I decided to stay with them for a few days. My job allows me to work remotely, so that wasn't a problem. However, I noticed that Liza was clearly irritated by my return. I tried to avoid her because we were both older now, and I didn't want to argue after my father's heart attack. One morning at breakfast, my father suggested that we all go on a vacation together since it had been a long time since we traveled as a family. At first, I had doubts, but understanding how important it was for him, I agreed. As for Liza, she wasn't thrilled, but she had no choice. My father organized everything: plane tickets, accommodations, and planned the vacation in advance. He even informed colleagues not to disturb me, as I genuinely wanted to spend time with the family. However, when we arrived at the airport, it turned out that my ticket had been cancelled. My father and I exchanged puzzled looks. He insisted that he had booked and paid for my ticket. After checking everything, we discovered that out of the 4 tickets, only mine had been cancelled. While I was trying to process this, I looked at Liza. She was standing there with a sly smile, looking at me, the same expression I had seen many times before, the one she wore when she successfully pulled off another manipulation. I realized at that moment that she had cancelled my ticket, most likely using my father's computer. I started yelling at her while she continued to stand there, smiling. I pointed out to my parents that Liza had orchestrated this because she never wanted me to go on the vacation with them. Instead of believing me, my mum immediately dismissed my accusations, saying, "Your sister would never do that." She added that I needed to stop being jealous of my younger sister and that my ticket being cancelled was just an unfortunate accident. My father also tried to justify it, suggesting it might have been an airline error and that I shouldn't blame Liza. I was completely desperate that my parents couldn't even imagine that their beloved miracle daughter could be involved in such deceit. At this point, there was nothing I could do. My ticket had been cancelled, and there were no other flights that day. I could have flown the next day, but I didn't want to return home, book a new ticket, and fly alone. This was supposed to be a family trip. I also had no desire to share a room with Liza during the vacation. I had hoped she would have matured over the years, but if she had really cancelled my ticket, I couldn't help but wonder what other schemes she might have devised to ruin my trip. At first, my father wavered, suggesting we return home and plan a new trip later. But then he began talking about how long it had been since he had been on a vacation. My mum agreed with him, saying that I already travel a lot for work and wouldn't really lose anything if I didn't go. These comments hurt me deeply. It seemed they were expecting me to tell them to continue the vacation without me. So I said that they could go on vacation without me if they wanted, and they agreed easily. Even though I didn't want the money spent on tickets and the hotel to go to waste, I felt sad that they didn't care whether I went or not. It became clear that they were completely fine with going on a family vacation as three. Thus, I was left alone at the airport while my parents and Liza went on their long-awaited trip. I decided to return home to San Francisco, not wanting to spend another day at my parents' house. I tried to forget what had happened and focused on enjoying the rest of the vacation time I had taken from work. I reconnected with old friends and spent my days immersed in books. During the vacation, my parents occasionally called me via video, and I could see them enjoying their time without me. My absence didn't seem to affect their trip at all. While I wasn't overly upset about missing the vacation, I still felt a sense of being discarded. It was another reminder that in our family, Liza had always come first. I hoped that someday they would see Liza's true nature, and it seemed my wish finally came true. A few days after their trip, I woke up to several missed calls from my mum. Fearing that my father's health might have suddenly worsened, I immediately called back. Fortunately, she answered, but she sounded extremely anxious. I asked if everything was okay, and she told me something very alarming had happened. It turned out that my parents had noticed that my father's necessary heart medications were disappearing day by day. This was extremely dangerous because my father could not afford to miss any doses due to his fragile health. They were in another country and didn't know if they could find the same medications outside the US. They became seriously concerned about the missing pills and searched the entire room but found nothing. My mum went to Liza's hotel room, which was next to theirs, to borrow sunscreen while Liza was out. To her shock and horror, she found all the missing medications carefully hidden in Liza's bedside drawer. It was a terrifying discovery, and she immediately called my father. My father rushed to Liza's room and found all the medications that had been disappearing in recent days. I believe this was the moment my parents realized that their beloved, my daughter, the so-called miracle, was deliberately putting my father's health at risk. My mother's voice was trembling when she asked me if they should talk to Liza about it now. I told her not to speak with Liza until they got home. They needed to calm down and gather their thoughts in order to confront Liza effectively. Talking to Liza right away was useless, as she was a master manipulator and would surely find an excuse to avoid responsibility. Something likely happened that night, and my parents eventually decided to talk to her. Late that night, my father called me. His voice was trembling as he told me that Liza was in jail. I was stunned. He explained that Liza had a meltdown when they asked her about the missing medications. She started throwing things and shouting all kinds of insults. Her anger was mostly directed at my father. She blamed him for buying my ticket and claimed he shouldn't have allowed me to go on the trip with them. She even said that if they continued interacting with me, she would teach them a lesson. They wouldn't forget. Liza continued raging, and the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Eventually, someone at the hotel called the police. When the officers arrived, she refused to calm down and began insulting them, which led to her arrest. Liza was supposed to be released after 24 hours, and my parents couldn't do anything at that moment. In desperation, they tried to change their return flight to get back home after her release, but their plans failed when they discovered that their passports and wallets were missing. It turned out that Liza had either thrown away or hidden their passports, leaving them stranded in a foreign country without documents or money. I believe that at that moment, my parents began seeing Liza for who she really was. My mother, who had defended Liza for years, now begged me for help, as they had no money or passports to fly back. She was shocked to realize the true nature of her angelic daughter. I told them not to worry, I would send money via Western Union, but they needed to find the passports to return home. I was confident that Liza hadn't thrown them away. Finally, my parents realized that I had been telling the truth about Liza all along and were grateful for my help. Despite leaving me at home and not taking me on the trip, they apologized for their behavior. Although part of me wanted to forgive my parents, I still struggled with the feeling that they had deprived me of their love all these years because of their attachment to Liza. Ultimately, I still felt hurt because they went on vacation without me, and now that they had faced the real Liza, they came to me asking for forgiveness. So, how would you answer this? Why do you think Liza stole the medications, money, and passports? Please write your thoughts in the comments. We will continue the update every day. My parents call me with fresh news, and I grow more worried about their situation. After Liza was released the next day, my parents said they would go back to the police if she didn't return the passports. Having no other choice, Liza eventually admitted where she had hidden them. When they returned home, my parents openly told Liza that she had to pack her things and move out. They finally accepted the bitter truth about their daughter's manipulations and harmful actions. They were especially concerned that she might once again put my father's health at risk by stealing his medication. This led to another loud argument between Liza and my parents. During the conflict, Liza began blaming them, expressing her anger and resentment. She claimed she didn't want to share them with anyone else and that she had been pushed to the limit when they invited me on the trip. Liza continued insisting that my parents should cut me out of their lives, claiming that having her alone was more than enough. At that moment, my parents likely realized the depth of her jealousy and how much she hated me. Despite their attempts to calm her, she continued shouting. In a fit of desperation and anger, she said she would tell everyone that they had neglected her as a child and treated her badly, essentially accusing them of parental neglect. Liza also threatened to go to the police and give false statements against my parents if they insisted on evicting her. This genuinely scared my parents, as such false accusations could seriously complicate their situation, especially since they were respected doctors in the area. The mere thought that their reputation could be destroyed by false claims left them feeling helpless and anxious. In the past few days, Liza has continued to make life difficult for my parents. When she learned that they had been contacting me more often, she flew into a rage, smashing dishes in anger. Even worse, she constantly hides their car keys, making it difficult for them to get to work. This evening, my mum called me in tears. After yet another argument, Liza had a huge tantrum and yelled at them because she wanted my mum to make her dinner. When my mum refused because she was tired from work, Liza began smashing furniture in the house. Then she went to her room and turned the music up full blast, not letting my parents get a peaceful sleep. The situation continued to worsen, and it greatly affected my parents' emotional and mental well-being. I grew increasingly worried about what might happen next. Although I had wanted my parents to see Liza's true nature, now I feared that she could pose a real threat to them. I couldn't even return home, as it might further provoke her behavior and led to new conflicts. I was doing everything I could to convince my parents to consult a lawyer so we could find a solution to this problem. The legal route seemed the best option to protect them and restore peace in our family. Update 2. As many had predicted, Liza was arrested again due to her increasingly dangerous antics. It was inevitable. One night, during a major argument, she lunged at my parents with a knife. This terrified them, and they were forced to call the police. The officers quickly detained Liza and arrested her for assault. At that point, my parents decided it was time to take a more radical step. They consulted a lawyer who explained the legal process for evicting Liza from their home. They filed an official eviction notice stating that she had to move out. They understood this wasn't an easy step, but it was necessary for their safety. My parents did not want to press charges against her. They simply wanted her to leave. They posted bail for her release from jail and handed her the official eviction notice. The document outlined all legal reasons and the deadlines by which Liza had to leave the house. My parents made sure everything was done strictly according to the law, so Liza could not contest the decision. Then, with the help of the lawyer, they went to court to begin the eviction process, which meant filing a lawsuit against Liza. 4. My parents. This was incredibly difficult. They had to take legal action against their own daughter. They felt deep sadness and guilt but understood there was no other way. The court issued an official order stating that Liza had to leave the house. If she didn't leave voluntarily, my parents would have full legal right to evict her with police assistance. Liza is expected to move out next week. My parents can finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing they have taken a step toward restoring peace in their home. It was a difficult path, but they hope life will improve once Liza leaves. Throughout all of this, I stayed in close contact with my parents and plan to invite them to San Francisco for a few weeks. This will give them a chance to take a break and recover from everything they've endured. I'm confident that a change of environment and time away from the stress Liza caused will be beneficial. Plus, it will be an opportunity to spend time together and support them as much as I can. Update 3. Many people suggested that Liza should undergo a psychological evaluation. The problem is, since she is an adult, we cannot force her to attend against her will. Due to her sudden outbursts of aggression, we don't want to provoke her and make the situation worse. My parents flew to San Francisco to spend a few days away from everything they've gone through over the past months. Last night, as we sat at my cozy apartment for dinner, they spoke to me openly. Their voices were full of humility and regret. They admitted that they had been blind to Liza's true nature all these years and asked me for forgiveness. My father expressed remorse for not heeding my warnings. Earlier, he admitted that they never expected Liza to become like this and could not see the truth behind her charming mask. Mum supported his words, acknowledging the seriousness of their mistake in ignoring my concerns about Liza's behavior over the years. Her voice trembled as she spoke about the pain of realizing that they had let me down by favoring Liza. I told them that I appreciated their attempt to take the first step toward forgiveness. I shared with them some painful memories of what I had endured because of Liza's actions. My parents listened, shocked and upset, realizing how deeply I had suffered alone. They acknowledged the pain I had gone through and expressed regret that I had felt isolated in my own family. They explained that their attachment to Liza had clouded their judgment because they had not expected Mum to become pregnant again and had always considered Liza their miracle child. With sincerity in their voices, they asked for forgiveness for all those years. It was a bitter and yet sweet moment for me because I had always wanted their acknowledgement. Although this was not the perfect way to repair our relationship, it was at least a turning point, bringing the honesty and clarity into our communication. That had been so necessary. For the first time in many years, we truly acknowledged the problems that had been undermining our lives. I told them that it would take time for me to trust them again, and we all agreed to work on it together. Meanwhile, I plan to make the most of the time spent with my family while they are here with me over the next few days. Update 4. Over time, my parents and I spent more and more time together, walking through the bustling streets, enjoying leisurely meals, and simply taking pleasure in each other's company. It was a difficult journey to rebuild our relationship, which had been fractured by years of bias and denial. I realized that their decision to seek comfort in my company was not only about physically distancing themselves from Liza, but also about wanting to restore the family they nearly lost. They needed a fresh start just as I did. My parents and I have already discussed what to do about Liza. She is currently staying with one of her friends. We cannot simply abandon her, despite everything she has done to the family. As parents, Mum and Dad feel a deep sense of responsibility for their daughter, even if her actions were inexcusable. We acknowledge that her behavior may not just be a whim, but could indicate more serious underlying issues. We plan to explore the possibility of a mental health evaluation to better understand what is happening with her. However, since Liza is an adult, we cannot force her to undergo an assessment, so we plan to find a way to convince her to seek help voluntarily. My parents intend to contact Liza when she returns home to see if she is ready to talk. I do not want to engage with her directly, as she still harbors resentment toward me, and I am trying not to worsen the situation for the sake of her mental health. Considering her past incidents of aggression and violence, I advised my parents to meet with her in a public place so that she would be compelled to control her emotions. Our main goal is for Liza to understand our perspective and, more importantly, to recognize the deep love and care we have for her. This is not about blaming anyone. It is about coming together as a family and addressing the issues that have damaged our relationship. I kicked out my husband and his manipulative friend after he let her move into our house and even wanted to share a bedroom with her. I'm 28, my husband is 30. We've been married for 4 years, having tied the knot after 3 years of dating. Overall, our relationship was fine except for one major issue: his deep connection with his best friend. He always called her his best friend, and she's been his neighbor since childhood. They were inseparable from a very young age. Let's call her Fiona. Fiona and my husband went to the same kindergarten, attended the same primary, middle, and high school, and even enrolled in the same college, though they studied in different departments. They were attached at the hip, and it was impossible for me to forget it because they constantly brought up memories from their past at every opportunity. They only drifted apart once they started working. That's when I met my husband. Fiona once told me, rather casually, that I was the third most important woman in my husband's life. First was his mother, second was her, and then came me. She said it jokingly, but I have no doubt she truly believed it. Honestly, I always felt she disliked me and saw me as a rival. When my husband first introduced me to her, he presented her as his older friend, and I tried to be polite. But almost immediately, she mocked my makeup, claiming I didn't need to impress her. It happened repeatedly. She constantly made cutting remarks about my makeup, clothing, and so on. Sometimes her compliments left me feeling insecure. Once, she bluntly told me that my husband had a thing for dumb blondes and I was a blonde. I'm sure you get the picture. I tried talking to my husband about it several times before we got married, expressing my uneasy feelings about Fiona. But he brushed me off, saying I'd get used to her over time. He insisted that she wasn't liked by everyone because she never filtered her words and was too blunt for most women. Looking back, the fact that he belittled others to make her look good should have set off alarm bells. But at the time, it seemed trivial compared to the chance to be with him. He was perfect in every other way, intelligent, funny, charming. I was willing to tolerate Fiona because I loved him deeply, and he constantly reassured me that he loved me. So I let it slide. Over time, I stopped paying attention to Fiona and refused to let her get under my skin. Things improved even more when she got a boyfriend. She no longer picked on me without reason. 4 years ago, Fiona met Eddie through a dating app, and within a year, they were engaged. Saying she was head over heels in love doesn't even begin to cover it, and it seemed he was just as smitten. Despite their obvious attachment, I still believed that a year wasn't enough to truly know someone. They hadn't lived together long enough to consider marriage seriously. Fiona and I weren't friends, and I knew if I said anything, she would throw a fit, so I stayed silent. I confided in my husband, hoping he would gently guide her toward a rational decision, but he only gushed about how wonderful it was that he and Fiona got engaged around the same time as us, even hinting they might have a joint wedding. They actually discussed having a combined ceremony, but I stopped it early, pointing out that Fiona and I had too many fundamental differences. Thankfully, she didn't push it. Fiona married Eddie about a month after our wedding, and everything was fine until recently, 5 months ago, Fiona confided in my husband that she was having trouble conceiving. They planned to get medical evaluations after trying unsuccessfully for nearly 6 months. Unfortunately, it turned out Fiona was infertile. From that point, their marriage began to unravel. Even therapy with a family psychologist didn't help, because Eddie went ahead and filed for divorce. He didn't want to be with a woman who couldn't have children, unwilling to spend his life in a childless marriage. Honestly, I felt some sympathy for Fiona. She started visiting us much more often than before, and I tolerated it because I understood how difficult things were for her, and apparently, my husband was her only true friend. I couldn't get upset about her frequent visits, especially since she would just cry every time, and my husband would try to console her. It was almost impossible to be angry at someone already enduring such emotional pain, especially knowing she truly loved Eddie. Then came the divorce proceedings and property negotiations. They had to see each other often, which made things even harder for her. She began spiraling into complete despair. That's when my husband asked if she could stay with us for a while, claiming it would help her feel normal again being near him. This was about 2 weeks ago. As soon as I let her into my home, I immediately regretted it. She criticized literally everything I did, and it always seemed to slide off her back. She was depressed, unhappy with the food, our home decor, even my choice of TV shows. Ultimately, we had to follow her rules because according to my husband, that's what she needed right now. I told him multiple times that Fiona needed to leave, that if she disliked everything, she should return to her parents. But he begged me to let her stay, worried she might do something foolish if we threw her out in such a fragile state. I stayed silent, unwilling to take responsibility if something happened. 2 days ago, however, I finally had to kick them both out because they crossed all boundaries. When I came home from work, I saw my husband had moved some of his belongings from our bedroom into the guest room where Fiona was staying. He had even come home early to organize everything. When I walked in, they were still moving his things into the room. I was in shock and asked my husband if we could talk privately, but he said we could talk right in front of Fiona. Honestly, for the first time in weeks, she looked happy. I asked why he was moving into the guest room, and he calmly replied that he would now be living in the same room with Fiona. I just froze for a few seconds when I asked, "What the hell is going on?" He said that Fiona had been having panic attacks for several days and needed someone to comfort her at night when she woke up in a panic over the divorce. I immediately told him that was out of the question and that he must be insane if he thought I would accept this. But once again, he used his favorite excuse about Fiona. She's like a sister to him, and I had nothing to worry about. Both of them stood there, smiling at me, as if that smile could make the whole situation normal and acceptable. I was so angry and disappointed that I wanted to hit them both. But instead, my rage reached a point where I decided to act differently. I smiled at them in return and said that I completely understood and that everything was absolutely fine with me. My husband even dared to say he was sure I would understand, and they continued arranging the room. Meanwhile, I went back to our bedroom and retrieved the house documents. My father had given me this house when I started my first job, and it was legally in my name only, so the house legally belonged to me. When I found the papers, I returned to the guest room and politely asked if they had finished unpacking. When they said yes, I told them it was time to pack again because very soon they would be outside, free to play happy family as much as they liked. My husband couldn't understand what was happening for a few seconds until I showed him the documents and told him that the house was mine and that I would no longer tolerate this in my own home or allow them to humiliate me. He tried to joke, thinking I was kidding, but when he realized I wasn't laughing, he said I was being absurd and couldn't just kick them out. I told him I could, and I was doing it so arguing was pointless. I said I was disgusted by him, and even more by Fiona, because she now represented a strange mix of a drama queen and a whiner, which drove me crazy. Fiona, of course, burst into tears again, and my husband defended her, accusing me of always being jealous because of my insecurities. I didn't deny it because it was true. I really am that way. But the cause wasn't me, it was their twisted relationship. I told them that if they couldn't live without each other, they shouldn't try to build relationships with anyone else and ruin their lives the way they ruined mine. A heated argument followed, but in the end, they left. My husband said he felt insulted because he loved me and that still wasn't enough for me. Fiona kept crying, accusing me one last time of jealousy and cruelty. I didn't respond. I had no energy left to argue with them. I just wanted them gone. I thought all my problems would end once they left, but I was wrong. As soon as I kicked them out, our mutual friends, the ones who never cared about our marriage before, started messaging me, saying I was making a mountain out of a molehill. In their view, my husband only wanted to support Fiona because panic. Attacks are serious, and instead of showing empathy, I turned it into drama and made it about my own insecurities. I immediately realized he had probably orchestrated this because all the messages were almost identical. I tried to ignore them, then he involved his family. Everyone insisted I was awful for kicking them out while Fiona was going through such a difficult time. They said I had no heart and didn't deserve a husband like him. From the start, it was clear he wasn't the right match for me. Deep down, I always knew it, which is why I felt threatened by Fiona. I realized arguing with them was pointless, so I blocked everyone for my own peace of mind. No one tried to understand my feelings. They didn't care, they only cared about my husband and Fiona and their own feelings. I thought blocking them would solve the problem, and I was already planning to file for divorce. But my husband reached out again from a different number, saying he was still willing to come back if I apologized. In that message, he repeated that he had always considered Fiona a sister, not someone he had romantic feelings for. So, I must have misunderstood everything. He said he cared for her and even loved her, but it was a platonic, brotherly love, not the kind he felt for me. He said the thought of living without me was unbearable, that leaving had been a mistake. But he also felt I overreacted and misunderstood everything. He asked me to think calmly, weigh the consequences, and not make a foolish decision I'd regret for life. He said he was willing to restore our relationship if we both apologized for the misunderstanding. I honestly don't know how to respond because I feel like I didn't overreact. And now, I'm not even sure if divorcing him is the right decision, especially since he keeps insisting Fiona is like a sister to him. Honestly, his message threw me off completely, and I'm not sure if I should follow through. I really feel like I did the right thing by kicking him out after he said he wanted to sleep in the same room as his childhood friend to comfort her during nighttime panic attacks. Before we continue to the update, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Personally, I think the author did the right thing. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship her husband has with this friend. Romantic or platonic, it's all inappropriate. Even a sibling-like bond of this intensity is unhealthy. It reminds me of the movie The Dreamers 2003, where a young man befriends a brother and sister with extremely strange boundaries. They weren't sleeping together, yet their relationship went far beyond what's normal for siblings. They were stuck in some kind of childhood period, even though they were already fully grown adults. And it all ended with the main character simply not being able to take it anymore and leaving because these people started doing complete nonsense, putting their lives in danger. Not just minor danger, but real, life-threatening danger. So yes, absolutely. The author should leave a husband like that if he allows himself such behavior. Now, let's continue. Update 1. Well, it seems I was truly blind. The comments on my first post opened my eyes because I realized I had simply let my guard down. And now my marriage is ruined. I should have stopped his friendship with Fiona from the very beginning. Even if it meant we would have broken up back then, it would have been worth it, because at least I wouldn't be getting a divorce now because of her. I just don't understand how I let things get so far between them. Maybe I just loved him too much. Maybe I still do. That's why I seriously considered forgiveness and the idea of getting back together. In my defense, he is good with words and had spent years convincing me that his friendship with Fiona was completely normal, and that my insecurities were my own problem. He constantly gaslighted me, insisting I was wrong. It was years of manipulation, and in the end, he pushed me to the breaking point by wanting to sleep in the same room with her. That was the final straw. My parents support me and believe I did the right thing filing for divorce. After something like that, restoring the marriage is impossible. He can't just take back his words, and I don't think he will break off his relationship with Fiona for me. A few days have passed, and I still haven't responded to him. I don't even know where they are now, and honestly, I don't want to, because I wouldn't like any of the possibilities. I deserve someone who puts me first, and my husband never did. I was a complete fool. I hope one day he will put me above Fiona, but now I understand that will never happen, and it's better for us to separate. I filed for divorce and hope the papers will be served to him soon. Thank you again to everyone who commented and helped me realize how foolish I was. I really needed to hear that. Update 2. My husband was served the papers a week ago, and he decided not to contest the divorce. It seems that if he's not going to fight for the marriage in court, there should be nothing more to discuss, but he came to me yesterday evening to say how disappointed he was that I was leaving him over such a small matter. I didn't expect him at all, especially after humiliating him and kicking them both out. But he said he needed to collect some belongings, so I let him in. When he finished, he sat across from me on the couch and said he wanted to talk. I stayed, silent, waiting for him to speak. He said he wouldn't contest the divorce if I insisted, but he wanted me to know that, in his opinion, I was making a mistake. He claimed he had always loved only me, and it hurt him that I even thought he could betray me. Regarding Fiona, he said she and he were now living at his parents' house, and the whole family was upset by my decision to leave over such nonsense. After being served, my mother-in-law allegedly wanted to talk to me herself, but he stopped her out of respect for my choice, not wanting to pressure me through family. I found this slightly hypocritical, considering that this man orchestrated messages from all our mutual friends, begging me to take him back and calling me heartless after I kicked them out. I reminded him of it, and he clearly got nervous. He denied involvement, claiming everyone wrote of their own free will, but I'm no fool. I showed him the messages from our friends. They were identical. It was obvious someone gave them instructions on what to say, and they just copied the text. His denials changed nothing. He tried to steer the conversation elsewhere and complained about how hard the last few days had been, realizing our marriage was ending. He began crying on the couch, saying life would never be the same without me. And he kept thinking about how it could be fixed. IT was already fairly fake, but the tears were too much. I felt no sympathy, and the first thing that came to mind was maybe I would reconsider the divorce if he promised never to see Fiona again. That truly shocked him. He almost immediately stopped crying, and we sat in silence, waiting to see who would speak first. For the record, I had no intention of staying with him, regardless of his answer. Even if he said he would end things with Fiona, I still would have left. Of course, he didn't say that. Instead, he argued that I was unfair, repeating the same lines I had heard in every argument about their friendship, that Fiona was his oldest friend, like a sister, and he couldn't abandon her, especially now during her hardships. But leaving me, his wife, to whom he had made vows, that was somehow normal. I was tired of listening to his excuses for why he had to maintain his friendship with Fiona, so I interrupted him. I told him that's exactly why I was leaving. Even when he had a choice between staying with me or keeping Fiona in his life, he chose her. So now he can't complain that I didn't give him a chance or that I overreacted. I was right in everything, and he had nothing to say. He simply stood up and left. Now, all that remains is to wait for the official procedures to begin. Update 3. A few weeks have passed since the last update, and today we met in court for the first time. According to the laws of our state, we have to wait at least 6 months before the divorce can be finalized. After the hearing, my husband approached me and said he was willing to wait all 6 months if it would help me come back to him. I was completely shocked that he was still trying to win me back, even though we hadn't seen or spoken to each other for weeks. I thought there was nothing left to talk about now that we were at the point of divorce, but he spoke and tried to make contact. I asked if he was still living with Fiona, and he couldn't answer. We just stood there in silence. I rolled my eyes and was about to get in the car when he said Fiona couldn't go back to her parents because her mother is unbearable, and blames Fiona for the divorce, supposedly because she is responsible for not being able to have children. That's why she first moved in with us and then with his parents. I knew I probably should have felt sorry for her, but honestly, it was hard to feel compassion for someone who always made me feel worthless and ultimately caused my divorce. I told my husband, already sitting in the car, that Fiona had plenty of other friends, including some single people who would gladly take her in. He just refuses to admit that there's something wrong with their friendship. It's because of her that we're divorcing, but he still refuses to face the obvious truth that letting her move in with us was completely unnecessary. We argued again, and it only confirmed how foolish I had been all this time. I can't believe I even considered giving our marriage another chance. These relationships cost me too much friends, nerves, and a ton of money. Fiona lived with us for free, and now I even have to pay a lawyer. It's insane. I forgave so much just because I loved my husband, and he didn't even love me enough to admit that letting Fiona move in was a mistake. He's absurdly stubborn when it comes to her. I think it's good that we're divorcing. Now he can finally be with the woman he truly loves and stop wasting my time. I really hope he finally understands this and stops chasing after me. Update 4. Something absolutely crazy happened. I still can't believe my husband said such terrible things about Fiona. We saw each other just a few days ago, and I didn't expect him to show up again so soon, but yesterday he came to finally admit that he was wrong and that I was right about everything. He apologized and admitted his mistakes. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever hear that. I still can't believe he finally realized how wrong he was and that Fiona was always against me. I got home from work and was calmly going about my day when he suddenly started banging on the door. When I opened it, he just stormed in without waiting for me to say anything, and I immediately knew he was on edge.at first. I thought he was coming to start an argument and was ready to call the cops to have him removed from my property. But to my surprise, he started crying again this time for real, not for show like last time. I dropped everything and tried to comfort him. After all, I'm human too. I'm not the kind of person who stands by while someone cries and does nothing. Even if it had been Fiona, I would have done the same. After a while, he calmed down and explained that he had taken a day off and spent the whole day at home depressed about the divorce. Fiona came into his room to comfort him, but instead started flirting with him. She had never done that before. He tried to push her away, saying he wasn't in the mood for jokes, but she tried to get close to him. That's when he set boundaries. He realized I had been right about her all along. Even though he had always seen her strictly as a friend, or even like a sister, she had been trying to make a move on him all this time. They had a huge fight, and Fiona accused him of leading her on all these years, then marrying me, called him a traitor, packed her things, and moved back with her parents, and now he came to apologize to me and admit that I was right about everything. He said he regretted taking me for granted and recognized that he didn't deserve a woman like me, and maybe this divorce would finally help him get his life together. We talked a little and clarified things. I realized he wasn't lying when he said he loved only me and saw Fiona as a sister. It still wasn't enough for me to go back to him, but at least I feel much better about my decision. We're still divorcing, but we'll try to finish things on good terms. I really hope we manage that. My husband left the family to join a men-only crowd, then years later came crawling back hoping for a warm welcome in 29. I got married 6 years ago, but we've been divorced for 3 years now. I have 2 sons from my ex-husband. Adam, he's 30, ages 4 and 5. I have full custody because he didn't want the burden of a family. We were happy for the first 3 years of marriage, had 2 wonderful children, and were even planning to buy our own home to move out of our apartment. Then suddenly he says, I want to be free and explore the world. We'd been together since high school and were everything to each other. He was my first in everything and I was his. I always thought we'd be together forever. He seemed fine with not having much experience with other women besides me. But 3 years into the marriage, he told me he was unhappy and wanted us both to free ourselves from the burden, meaning our marriage and family, so we could live life to the fullest. It all sounded like nonsense. I couldn't understand it because I was sure he loved me. Adam insisted he still loved me, but you see, he also loved himself and wanted to give himself a chance to see the world. I even suggested temporarily opening our marriage, even though it would hurt me, just so he'd stay and not leave for good. But that idea didn't work for him. He wanted a divorce to keep things honest. I was crushed because it came out of nowhere. When I cried, he told me everything would be fine and that if we were meant to be, he'd come back. It was absurd and unfair, but that's how our marriage ended. One day he just packed his things and left to explore the world alone, leaving me with 2 kids without a second thought. When I asked what he thought would happen to the kids, he suggested leaving them with someone I trust so I could also travel and meet new people. That's when I fully realized he'd lost his mind. I stopped fighting the divorce. It went through easily. He didn't want anything and was willing to walk away from all responsibilities. His parents had money, so child support wasn't an issue. He had visitation rights but barely used them. When he did, he'd have me take the kids to his parents' house while he sat in another room, avoiding us. Even those visits stopped after the first couple of months. I later found out the real reason for his behavior from my friend Rachel, who had mutual acquaintances with Adam. Her cousin was part of the exact group of friends that influenced Adam. That cousin told her the whole story. About 2 months after our divorce, Rachel learned the truth. Her cousin lived a very indulgent lifestyle and was part of a men-only group, 6-7 guys who believed relationships were a burden. They had some kind of singleness pact. Adam was brought into the group by a colleague who thought he'd fit right in even though he had a wife and 2 kids. Rachel's cousin bragged to relatives that they had convinced a married man with kids to drop the dead weight and become successful, which is exactly what Adam did. He divorced me and gave up custody just to fully commit to their ideology. Rachel, curious, asked what the guy looked like. When her cousin pointed to Adam in a group photo, she instantly put 2 and 2 together and came to tell me. When I found out he had left us to join some ridiculous adventure-seeking club, I was furious. Honestly, it would have been easier for me if he'd just cheated. At least that would be a more understandable reason than this nonsense. I wanted to call and scream at him, but I didn't. Knowing the real reason only convinced me further that nothing I could say would change him. So I focused on raising my sons to be better men than their father. I hired a nanny, worked twice as hard so I could leave work at the office and devote my home time to my kids. My parents helped a lot. Even my ex-in-laws occasionally offered minimal help, probably out of shame for their son. They were the ones paying the child support, since Adam reportedly blew his own money on exotic trips and luxury hotels. Now my boys are sweet, well-behaved, and love each other dearly. We are our own family, and that's all we need. I barely think about Adam anymore. I worked my way into a great position and now earn double what I used to. For the last 2 years, everything was going great until last week. Out of nowhere, after 3 full years of no contact, Adam showed up. It was a Sunday and we were all at home. We even have enough saved now to buy our own house. But I stayed in this apartment because I love it so much and it's convenient. For work. Obviously, I should have moved after all, because unfortunately, by staying in the same place, Adam knew where to find me. That day, he just showed up at our door without warning, and honestly, it felt like the air got knocked out of my lungs. It had been so many years. For the first few seconds, we were both silent, and I just looked at him, this awkward, huge bouquet of red roses, his teary smile. Call me heartless, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of tenderness or excitement, only pure, burning hatred, and before he could say anything, I slammed the door with all my strength so hard the floor shook. I told the kids to go to their rooms because I knew he'd try to convince me of something, and I definitely wouldn't be able to stay calm. Rage, resentment, and anger were boiling inside me, and I didn't want my kids to witness the chaos that was about to start. Sure enough, as soon as the kids left, Adam started whining that he didn't expect such a reception. I could hear him trying his hardest not to break into tears, which only pissed me off more. This was the guy who had dumped all this bitch on me for years ahead, and now he dared to cry and act like he was the victim. Then he started saying he had come back to apologize, that he regretted everything he'd done in the past, and now he just wanted his old life back. I was shocked, but I let him finish, because some part of me wanted to hear that apology, whatever that word even meant to him. I had completely erased him from my mind, but his sudden appearance stirred everything up again, and maybe, in some twisted way, I enjoyed the chance to put him in his place. I wanted him to know that without him, our lives had only gotten better, and nobody missed him. He went on for a couple of minutes about how much fun he'd had all these years, but in the end, he felt empty because there was no one to come back to accept another lonely hotel room. He admitted that in recent months, he felt like something was missing and finally made the very difficult decision to come back and apologize so he could fix everything. Turns out the thrill of traveling and exploring life with his new group of friends had burned out within a few months, but he clung to that lifestyle because he was afraid to return. He thought that since he'd sacrificed so much for it, he had to stick with it until the end. But now, he just wanted to get it all back. The more he talked, the more I wanted to open the door and punch him in his stupid face with all my strength. I couldn't listen to this nonsense anymore, so I told him to leave us alone, that I didn't want to see or hear him again. But Adam being Adam, he was sure that if he kept rambling and begging at my door, he'd convince me eventually. At some point, it got extremely annoying, and the kids needed to be called for dinner, so I just banged on the door and yelled that we were no longer a family and that he should get the hell out. I think that actually stunned him, because after that, I didn't hear him anymore. When the kids were having dinner, I immediately called my lawyer and told him everything that had happened, just in case. Then I called my parents, told them about Adam's visit, what he said, and how I responded. They assured me I'd done the right thing and had nothing to worry about. I didn't call my ex-in-laws, I didn't even know what to say to them, and I'm sure their son will tell them himself anyway. But as soon as I finished those calls, Rachel rang. Since she was the one who once told me the truth about why Adam left, I answered, already guessing she had something important to say, and I was right. The first thing she asked was if Adam had come by. I said yes, and then she told me her cousin had just called her to explain exactly why he had come back. Rachel and I are very close friends, and ever since she passed me that information from her cousin, she's told him to inform her immediately about anything related to Adam, because I was the one he dumped back then. When her cousin found out about me, I think he suddenly stopped feeling proud about recruiting Adam. I don't blame them, it's Adam's fault alone for being such a spineless coward. Her cousin promised to keep us updated about Adam, and even contacted me once himself to apologize. I forgave him, I had no grudges, but of course, we didn't become friends. He had been telling Rachel what Adam was up to, so I'd always known what was going on with him. By the way, after the divorce, Adam had blocked me everywhere, and now her cousin reached out to Rachel again to tell her the truth about why Adam had returned, and she passed it on to me. Apparently, their group had a shared chat since they first met. Just a couple of hours before Adam showed up at my door, he wrote in there about his plan. The guys seemed to support him at first, but Adam suddenly exploded, accusing them of fake support. He yelled that they had betrayed him because he'd sacrificed his whole life, left his wife and kids to live like them, but it turned out that over the years, they'd all gotten into relationships, and now he was the only one left, like the last idiot who actually ditched his family just to party with the boys. And meanwhile, those guys, most of them are now dating someone. They told him it wasn't fair to expect them to stick to the same ideology forever, especially since their whole no women philosophy was something they came up with when they were young and stupid. Now most of them are in their 30s and don't need that lifestyle anymore. In fact, a couple of them have been in serious relationships for over a year, and one of them is even engaged. So all their macho bragging from back then could just be tossed in the trash, and the only person who truly got screwed over was Adam, but he turned out to be the only idiot who believed all that nonsense they were spouting. As a result, a serious argument broke out between Adam and those guys, the very same people who once congratulated him for leaving me, but now they themselves want the life he gave up for them. And even though they were still trying to support him when he said he wanted everything back, it wasn't enough for him. He wanted them to apologize for making him leave his wife and kids. That's what the whole fight was about. The guys refused to apologize, and rightly so. They were just sharing their views, but none of them ever told Adam he had to leave us to be part of their circle. Of course, he would have had to give up the idea of traveling the world and living like them, since he had obligations at home, me and the kids, but he still could have stayed friends with them. No ultimatums were ever given. He left us of his own free will for the life he thought he wanted, just so he could fit into the group. And now he's doing the same thing again. Now that most of those guys are in relationships, he once again felt the pressure, once again wanted to be like everyone else. And that's the real reason he came back, not out of a sense of duty or emptiness like he tried to tell me. When I heard all this from Rachel, I started shaking because I had actually felt guilty for kicking him out. That's why I called my parents, wanting to hear that I'd done the right thing. If I had known all this beforehand, he really would have gotten it from me. But Rachel's cousin had been swamped at work, and while all this was being discussed in the group chat, he wasn't checking his phone, so he didn't know anything. Later, when he had time and saw the messages, he told Rachel right away, and she called me. So I only learned all this after Adam's visit, but now that I knew the real reason he came back, I decided once and for all that I would never let him back in, and I wasn't going to feel guilty anymore. He never once felt guilty about what he put me and the kids through, so why should I feel anything? He's just a terrible person, curva period. I mentally prepared myself for him to try crawling back again, but it never happened. For the next couple of days, I heard nothing. I even asked Rachel to check with her cousin if he knew anything, but he said he had no idea because after that fight, Adam had blocked everyone from the group, even Rachel's cousin, though he hadn't even been part of the argument and only learned about it afterward. That was a problem for me because if even the cousin was blocked, I completely lost my source of information about what Adam might do next. Adam is the kind of person who, before buying a damn pair of shoes, will talk it over with 5 people. He never does anything without consulting someone. And now that he'd blocked everyone, I was in total uncertainty. So naturally, when my former in-laws called me 3 days ago, I was caught off guard and didn't know what to expect. They said they were calling to discuss what I told Adam when he came to make things right. I told them I didn't want him back, and that was that. But they started saying that all this time they'd continued to pay child support and made sure their grandkids never went without anything, so I had no right to claim that we were no longer his family. We argued over the phone because they started defending him, and in the end, I just hung up. I keep replaying it in my head, but I still don't understand exactly what I did wrong. I honestly don't think I did anything bad. But in one thing, my in-laws were right. They have been fulfilling their part of the agreement, and technically, Adam still has the right to see the kids. He just hasn't exercised it in a long time. I don't know what to do now. On the one hand, I do want my kids to have a father, even though I'm managing fine on my own, so I don't want to take that away from him, not even sure I have the legal right to. I just can't make sense of anything right now. The only thing on my mind is my children. Am I wrong for telling my ex-husband that me and the kids are no longer his family after he abandoned us for 3 years? First update. Hi everyone. Thank you for your comments and support. I've decided to file an appeal and try to change the custody arrangements so that Adam will no longer even have the right to see the children. I don't know if I'll succeed or not, but it's worth a try. It's been 2 days since I posted my story here, and that's exactly the advice I received from most of you, so that's what I'm going to do. My parents support me too. The fact that Adam and his parents pay child support just means they were fulfilling the legal part of the agreement, but everything else fell entirely on me. I raised our children while he was out having fun with his buddies. He can't just decide when it's convenient for him to be part of our lives and show up on his own terms. Second update today, I filed the paperwork to terminate Adam's parental rights, and honestly, I really regret not doing it sooner. I should have filed as soon as he stopped visiting the kids a couple of months after he left us, but oh well, better late than never. Many people here commented on my decision, but I take back my earlier words about not wanting to deprive the kids of a father. They never had a father around, and who knows, Adam might one day walk out again. He was gone for 3 years, and now he can leave for good if he wants to live for himself, but not at the expense of my nerves and my children's mental health. I won't allow it, and I truly don't think I'm taking anything away from my kids because they never had a father to begin with, so they won't be missing anyone. Third update, so I didn't manage to fully terminate his parental rights, but now he can only see the kids if I'm personally present. That's something at least now he can't just push us around. If he can prove to the court that he's capable of being a stable and reliable father, then maybe we'll reconsider this arrangement. But for now, this is the maximum he gets. As for me, he is never coming back to me. That's not even up for discussion. After the court hearing, when he tried to talk to me again, I snapped and told him straight out that I knew about his pathetic need to fit into the cool crowd and that he should just marry his buddies because he's never getting anything from me. And if he weren't the father of my children, I wouldn't even give him a second glance. Then I just left with the kids, leaving him and his parents standing there with their jaws dropped. Damn, that felt good. So that's where things stand now. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm glad this at least turned out in the children's favor. They are the only ones who matter to me. Now, if Adam somehow manages to become a normal, responsible father and take on his parental duties, maybe my kids won't have to grow up without a dad, and maybe they won't have to learn how to shave from YouTube tutorials. But if he even once tries to pull any crap again, he will deeply regret it. He's already messed with my head enough, but I will never let my children go through that, no matter what. Son chose his stepfather over me and asked me to give up my parental rights. Everyone, I'm in a really tough spot with my son right now, and I deeply appreciate if you read this with care before commenting. My son just turned 17 a week ago, and this fall, he's supposed to start college. Our relationship has been strained ever since I decided to divorce his mother 2 years ago. No matter how hard I tried to repair things, nothing worked. He keeps pushing me away, and it's painfully heartbreaking. I've tried to stay close. While I had the strength, he doesn't respond to my messages or calls. And when he does come over, he spends all his time in his room, refusing to talk. The only time we communicate is at the dinner table, and even then, he keeps conversations to a minimum. Things with my ex-wife aren't great either, which I think is part of why my son seems to hate me so much now. I'm 44, my ex is 42. We were married almost 20 years. Everything started falling apart after I lost my job a few years ago. I was suddenly fired, and it shook our family. She's a teacher and always managed with her salary, which I admire, but she began resenting me. Even though I was doing everything I could to find a new job, the pressure mounted. Arguments became daily, then we barely spoke unless absolutely necessary. Bitterness built, and she filed for divorce. I didn't fight it. We were both exhausted, but she probably expected me to fight at least a little for our marriage. When I didn't, her hatred only deepened. During the divorce, she called me once, asking if I really planned to end it all. I told her, yes, everything we owned was divided evenly, no disputes, but our relationship was shattered. We had to work together for our son's sake, who struggled with our split. He didn't want us to divorce, and when it happened, he sided with his mother. It hurt deeply. After the divorce, we lived separately. My son naturally stayed with his mother, and I stayed with a friend. I think this is when she convinced him it was all my fault. She pulled him into our battles. It was cruel, but she wanted revenge, and she got it. 3 months ago, she married her colleague. I know him. He'd even visited our house a few times during her work gatherings. Everyone was shocked by their wedding, myself included. I don't know how long they'd been together or if she cheated, but at this point, it doesn't matter. What really hurt was seeing my son's posts about his new stepdad. They attended football games together, spent time together. Even on his birthday, which I wasn't invited to, he posted a picture with his mum and stepdad captioned, "Mum and Dad." It crushed me. I later organized a birthday for him, but he showed zero enthusiasm. He and his friends were in his room with the cake while I sat in the living room wondering what went wrong. That evening, after his friends left, my son said he wanted to discuss something serious. He told me he had thought a lot and decided he wants me to give up my parental rights so his stepdad can legally adopt him. He said he no longer feels any connection with me and prefers his new family, and he doesn't want me in his life anymore. I was stunned. At first, I wanted to argue, but quickly realized it wouldn't help. If he wants this new life, I can't force him otherwise. Heartbroken, I told him I would do whatever makes him happy. He thanked me and left the next day. The following days were the hardest. I couldn't make myself do anything, even skipped work for a few days. Everything felt meaningless. I had tried so hard to give him a good life, but he doesn't want that life from me at least. I spent days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to break down. I had no idea how to fix things, or if they could even be fixed at all. I knew my ex-wife played a role in this, and I suspect she's happy that she completely severed my bond with my son. I also despised her new husband not because he married the woman I once loved, but because he was taking my son away from me. But there was nothing I could do. Arguing with my son would only make things worse. All I could do was accept it and hope he might change his mind someday, and then a miracle happened. My son came back yesterday, but not for the reasons I had hoped. I thought maybe he finally realized that I'm his father. Perhaps his mother had brainwashed him, making him believe his stepdad would be a better father. But that wasn't the case. I hoped he'd understand how deeply I love him, and that love would make him reconsider. When he arrived, I was overjoyed, thinking he had changed his mind. But he looked extremely upset. When I asked what was wrong, he told me he didn't want me to give up my parental rights anymore because his stepdad said he couldn't afford his college tuition, so he had to come to me. There were no other options. His mother alone couldn't cover it all, so if he wanted to attend the college of his choice, he'd have to follow the custody agreement. He was heartbroken, and it cut me deeply. I never treated him badly, in fact, quite the opposite. I couldn't understand why he hated me so much. I hadn't done anything to deserve this hatred from my own son. It infuriated me that he despised me for no reason, except maybe because his mother had filled his head with lies. I have to admit she did a good job. I told him he didn't have to engage with me if he didn't want to, and that there are other ways to pay for college, get a job, apply for student loans. If he thinks I'm the worst father, then let him do what he needs to ensure his stepdad adopts him, because I don't want him to suffer any longer. Of course, I said it with heavy sarcasm and he understood. He looked embarrassed, said nothing, and I just kept talking. It felt like years of bottled up frustration and hurt, caused by my own son's hatred, finally erupted. I told him I didn't divorce by choice, his mother wanted it. And the only reason she hates me so much is because I didn't fight for our marriage. I don't know what stories she fed him while he lived with her, but I can assure him that the divorce wasn't just my fault. He's only 17 and knows almost nothing about me or my life. If he believes everything his mother told him, he's in for an unpleasant surprise. I'm not his enemy and never wanted the divorce. But if she did, I wasn't going to cling to that relationship. I knew he was upset about the divorce, but I tried to make things as good as possible for him. Even when I lived separately, I came over for dinners, but he ignored me because his mother convinced him it was all my fault. Eventually, I ran out of patience, and my son was just stunned. He had nothing to say. I could see my words had touched him. He looked both shocked and guilty. He barely muttered, sorry, and returned to his mother. The next day, we didn't speak, and I felt terrible about what happened. I should have controlled my emotions, and I'm ashamed for raising my voice, even though he's only 17 and his mother manipulated him for 2 years. But I also feel it was cruel of him to say the only reason he came back was so I would pay for his education. That felt completely wrong, so maybe yelling was my fault, but I couldn't hold back. Before we go on, I invite you to drop your thoughts in the comments. Personally, I think he did the right thing. I've spent my life holding back emotions, never speaking up when hurt, and it backfired. People, unfortunately, don't see silence as virtue, they see it as weakness to exploit. Meanwhile, his mother sits comfortably and continues to manipulate him, telling him I'm to blame for everything that I left him, that I divorced her, and so on. It's cruel, but sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and speak your mind, even if it's uncomfortable. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments before we continue. Update 1. Hi everyone. I just want to say thank you for all the support and kind messages. It warms my heart to see so many single dads connecting with my story. Stay strong, guys. I also noticed many of you asked whether I ever suspected my ex-wife of cheating. Honestly, no. Even during the divorce, there was nothing that made me think she was unfaithful. Maybe there were signs, but I simply didn't notice them. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. Whether she cheated or not isn't important. I have all the proof I need that she's a terrible person, using our son just to hurt me. Regarding why I didn't try to have my son live with me during the first months after the divorce, I tried. I really did. But my son insisted he was more comfortable staying with his mother, and since he was still in school, I didn't want to create more problems for him or my friend who was hosting me at the time. I visited occasionally, but the environment was so hostile, thanks to my ex, that I couldn't stay long. Eventually, he began to resent me. I don't know what more I could have done to prevent it. I really tried to shield him from the divorce drama, but my wife made sure to pull him into it and make him hate me. By the time I realized her plan, it was too late. My son had already drifted too far from me. It's been a few days since I last spoke with him. We've been texting but haven't called or met. I haven't heard from my ex either, so I assume he didn't tell her I yelled at him. Usually, he would have complained immediately, causing a huge scene, but since he hasn't, maybe it means he's finally starting to change. I'm cautiously hopeful, just hoping he calls or comes over so we can have a proper conversation and start mending our relationship. Update 2. Today, my son finally visited me, and the meeting, let's just say, was intense. I won't pretend our relationship magically healed. That's not how it works. Fixing years of damage takes time and effort. But today was at least a first step, and I'm grateful for that. At first, he was awkward and uncomfortable, but he apologized for his behavior. He admitted that during our divorce, his mother told him I destroyed our family and didn't fight for it, and he believed her. He hadn't heard my side, and at 15, he just needed someone to blame. I was the easiest target. The situation worsened when his mother remarried. My son said it was entirely her idea to post pictures with his stepdad, pretending they were a happy family even though they weren't that close. She did it just to punish me for the divorce, hiding the fact that she filed for it. She even tried to make him believe he needed me to relinquish parental rights so his stepdad could officially adopt him, but she didn't discuss it with him. She just presented it as a fact. His stepdad was shocked and explained that while he enjoys spending time with him, he isn't ready to adopt because the bond isn't there yet, and he didn't want to pay for college if adoption happened. This upset my son deeply, leaving him frustrated and conflicted. It was a relief to finally talk and for him to start seeing the manipulation from his mother. It was an incredible day, and we managed to begin restoring our connection. I know rebuilding will take time, but this was a strong start. I told him I'm ready to forgive and start fresh, no matter what happened in the past. He promised to talk to his mother about the lies she's been telling him, and even suggested family therapy so we can rebuild in a healthy way. I'm glad this is finally happening, and even more satisfied knowing my ex will get what she deserves. She's a terrible person who doesn't deserve to be a mother. Harsh, maybe, but true. Using her son solely to hurt me proves it. I'm even considering seeking full custody, though of course I'll discuss it with him first. If he truly wants to stay with her, I won't force him, but I hope he sees her for who she really is and decides to stay with me. Author's note: she spent years manipulating and gaslighting our son just to make my life miserable. I can't even imagine being that heartless. Update 3. My son just texted me. He wants to come over, and he asked me to pick him up from his mother's house. He said he has too many things to take the bus like usual. I'm in shock. I'm almost certain he's decided to move in with me. Everything happened so suddenly. I'm standing outside my ex's house waiting. He asked me to wait a few minutes. I can hear arguing inside, but I can't tell who's shouting at whom. I want to go in and bring him home immediately, but I can't without permission. I know she'll do everything possible to cause trouble, so I'm just waiting outside, hoping he comes out soon. Update 4. The shocking confrontation. He finally got home after an extremely long evening. I'm exhausted, but I feel I need to share what happened so I can process everything that went down today. As I mentioned earlier, I was waiting outside my ex's house because my son asked me to pick him up. A few minutes after posting my last Update, he finally came out. Even then, I could hear yelling from inside the house. My son looked furious as he walked to the car with his bags. Soon, I noticed my ex-wife storming out behind him. She was absolutely enraged, and the moment she saw me in the car, she came right up to the window and started screaming. It was terrifying, but I told her that if she didn't step back, I'd call the police. She did back off a little but didn't leave. As I helped my son load his things into the car, she continued shouting at me, claiming I had turned our son against her and calling me every name imaginable. I didn't care. I knew the truth, my son knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. She kept yelling even as we drove away, and suddenly, when we were just a few meters from her house, she threw a rock at the car, smashing my rear light. I pulled over a bit further and immediately called the police to report the incident. My son and I were in shock at her actions. I couldn't believe she would behave like this just because she'd been exposed. I filed a police report against her and returned home a few hours ago. My son had a complete nervous breakdown, and I could see how badly he was affected. Tomorrow, the first thing I'll do is take him to a therapist. I've also decided to file for full custody and a restraining order tomorrow because what happened today is completely unacceptable. I still hope her current husband realizes just how crazy the woman he's living with is and leaves while he still can. I also hope to secure full custody of my son and a restraining order against my ex as soon as possible. That's it for now. As you can see, things turned out to be even more complicated and intense than we imagined. Yet, the ending feels amazing. For me, because I finally got the chance to rebuild my relationship with my son, though gaining full custody was never something I expected this soon. We don't yet know if the court will grant full custody, but I believe there's a very good chance. My mum said my presence would ruin the trip, so I cancelled everything they planned with my money and watched it all fall apart from afar. They planned the perfect family vacation. Every hotel, every train, every glass of wine in Tuscany without telling me a word. But they made one mistake. They used my money. My mother grabbed me aside and said, "Next week is special, and you being there would ruin it." My father added, "You're too different now." I clinkered my fork to my glass. Duly noticed. That night, he reversed all Italy charges, locked their URL passes, and cancelled their airport connections. At check-in, they were-written everything. My brother's text arrived first. "Unblock the account now," I responded. I was so enraged that I couldn't sleep. They arranged everything without me. A perfect holiday in Italy from Venice to Florence to Rome. Everything was meticulously planned. Luxury hotels, high-speed trains, exclusive vineyard tours in Tuscany, and dinner reservations at restaurants where you must know someone to even be on the wait list. They planned it on their own and utilized my money to do it. Not one mention of me, nor my name, nor my daughter Lily's, nor my son Ethan's. Just my mother, father, sister Brooke, her husband Tyler, and their 2 children. That was the family they envisioned, the one that counted. It hit me when I received the email confirmation. It wasn't intended to come to me. Brooke must have forwarded it by accident. It showed everything, dates, passengers, and the schedule. And it felt like someone punched me in the chest. I sat there rereading everything, hoping to see my name somewhere in the footnotes. It never arrived. Mum proposed the idea 6 months ago during one of our regular Sunday dinners. She stated that she had always wanted to take a large family trip. She stated that she wanted the kids to experience Europe while they were still young. She added that Brooke and Tyler were short in cash and asked if I'd be prepared to help handle the initial expenses. She said she will settle it later. With enthusiasm, I replied, "Yes, of course." I recently secured a large consulting contract and wanted to do something special for the family, something that would help us become closer. I paid for the entire thing, flights, hotels, boarding cards, and so forth. Then they cut me out altogether. I didn't approach them immediately. I waited till Sunday. They were all there acting as if nothing had happened. Mum prepared baked CD ASIF it were just another Sunday. Dad spoke about golf. Brooke sat there smiling as if the knife had not already been twisted. After dinner, I casually mentioned the trip, saying, "It all sounds beautiful this time of year." Silence. Mum looked at me and said, "Next week is just special, and having me there would ruin it." Dad leaned back and remarked, "You're too different now." Nobody disagreed. None of them spoke up. It seemed as if they had all practiced it. I clinkered my fork against the glass. Duly noticed. I did not argue. I did not ask for an explanation. I took my kids home and helped them prepare for bed. And once the home was quiet, I began tow work. Everything remained in my name, including hotel rooms, passes, and transfers. They hadn't touched the bill. They did not even have the decency to conceal their arrogance. I reversed each charge one by one. Freeze the travel cards. I locked the train passes. We cancelled the transfers. The hotel reservations are no longer Lilia label. I sat back and watched everything burn. Tyler sent his first text message at 7:42. I am the next day. I've unblocked the account now. I said, sorry, I'm too deferent now. Then followed the calls from mum and emails from dad. Brooke texted me a screenshot of her crying daughter and claimed I was being unkind, but I did not respond. They intended to focus this trip on their family. Okay, let them find it out on their own expense. They were still unaware that this was only the beginning. They strutted it into JFK like they owned it. First class tickets with matching baggage sets. Tyler even wore loafers without socks. He seemed to believe that this automatically made him European. Brooke's Instagram story captioned, Kai Bella, featured a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking. I wasn't even upset at that point. I was simply waiting. They had no idea anything was gone. I had not just reversed the costs and cancelled the appointments. I had contacted each motel and described the scenario. Cancelled the Rome Airport Cars of Ice and the Chianti Vineyard excursion. I reported the URL passes as stolen. Changed the login information for the travel portal. Left no sign that the journey was ever theirs. I knew exactly when it began to fall apart. Their flight was scheduled to board at 6:40 p.m. At 6:12, I received a text from Tyler. Why are we denied boarding? Then Brooke, did you cancel the flights? Then came a flood of calls. Everything is neglected. It must have been chaotic. 4 parents and 2 children stood at the gate, astonished, trying to figure out why a trip that was meant to be completely paid for suddenly did not exist. Brooke may become loud. Tyler pretends to be calm. Dad attempting to assert some fictitious authority. Mom is probably just standing for mad. Someone told her no. I sat in my kitchen with Lily and Ethan, helping them bake pizza from scratch. They knew nothing. I wanted it that way. I continue to believe that Grandma and Grandpa had to cancel their vacation due to unforeseen circumstances. Approximately 9:00 p.m. The text tone shifted. Tyler, you are acting psychotic. You're harming your own family. Brooke, your children will hear about this someday. I did not respond either. I allowed the silence to work. Then Dad sent a message that nearly made me chuckle. You have embarrassed us. I said, you've gone too far. I hope it was still special. Next morning, I noticed their car in the driveway. They returned 20 hours after flight, defeated and drained. That's when the new game began. The second stratum of this entire tragedy. At 3:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Mum. No makeup, hair pulled back. Her tongue ranged between neutral and annoyed. She did not begin with an apology, not even close. She said, all right, you have made your point. I let her speak. She went on to say how such acts build wedges in families. I needed to be more tolerant, and it wasn't fair to spoil something they had planned for so long simply because I felt excluded. Following this, she stated, anyway, I wanted to talk to you about the backyard. The contract is still scheduled to start next month and we don't want to lose the date. Your dad said you might be able to help cover the deposit. You give her a look. She truly believed I would come around. Some part of me still wanted in. That money was simply something I would always provide because that is what I had always done. I nodded slowly. Let me check my accounts, I said. I'll let you know by the end of this week. She smiled as though she had won something back. She left satisfied. the time my boss outsmarted a cheating client a few years ago, my boss, Barry, got screwed over by a client. It wasn't a huge amount, just a couple $1,000s, but the fact remains he trusted Big Daddy Construction, delivered the work, and they flat out denied payment. Barry consulted a lawyer. The verdict? Since there was no written contract, going to court was pointless. Even if he won, legal fees would exceed any compensation. Big Daddy's response? Something along the lines of, "My lawyer will crush your lawyer." Barry asked, the one question every lawyer dreams of hearing, so what exactly was I supposed to do differently? It was 2017. Big Daddy landed a project to build a new restaurant. Barry submitted a bid to supply and install door hardware, handles, emergency locks, door closers, and 3 automatic door operators. These are the things you've seen at accessible entrances: a metal button with a wheelchair symbol that opens. The door for people with mobility challenges. Barry won the tender and called a meeting. He would personally manage the project. All communication with Big Daddy had to go through him. Anyone calling about trivial matters like, "Nice weather, isn't it?" would be transferred immediately to Barry, under threat of immediate termination. No one on the team could give Big Daddy staff Barry's number. After hours, technicians could only call back and leave a message for Barry. Weeks later, the general contractor GC called. He managed the project on behalf of Big Daddy and was the boss's son. He was a tyrant, aggressive, foul-mouthed, and convinced the world revolved around him. GC's job was coordinating all contractors and ensuring the construction phases happened in order: walls first, then plumbing, electrical, drywall, tiling, painting, ceiling, cabinets, fixtures, and finally, the plumbing fixtures. Managing all that is stressful, requiring collaboration, but screaming and cursing doesn't help. We needed to install 3 automatic door operators, 2 at the entrances and 1 in the accessible restroom. By law, there had to be a wheelchair accessible. Restroom. This restroom was in the corridor used by waiters. The restaurant's decor was a dark Victorian gentleman's club, thick oak, carpets, a decorative wall with niches for sculptures and paintings. When GC called saying everything was ready, Barry and the team installed the door operators according to the tender. Big Daddy was supposed to provide 120 volts power to the operators and 12 volts wiring from the activation buttons to the control board. None of that was done. Barry improvised. He connected the operators via an extension cord and used a wireless transmitter and receiver so the buttons would work. This was all allowed under the tender conditions. Once the permanent wiring was installed, Barry personally supervised the connection. GC signed the installation acceptance document. In fine print, it stated that Big Daddy was fully responsible for compliance with building codes. GC didn't even read it, just scribbled a signature and left. Barry made sure a technician watched him sign. About 2 weeks before the restaurant's opening, GC called in a panic. None of the door operators worked, and the restaurant couldn't open without them. The next day, Barry went to the site with the technician. "Barry, I found the problem." GC, "Well, fix this damn problem." Barry, "The doors don't have 120 volts power, and there's no 12 volts wiring for the buttons. You didn't run the cables." GC, "That wasn't my job." Barry, "Why didn't you tell me last time? You signed this?" GC, "Where's the electrician?" The electrician arrives. Barry, "What happened? Why isn't the wiring done?" Electrician, "It's not in my scope." Barry, "Good news, if we use wireless controls for the buttons, we won't need the 12 volts wiring. I'll bill this as additional work." Barry knew that once the 120 volts power was supplied, the operators would work. That's when GC realized how screwed he was. The restaurant's finishing work was 90% complete, but no power had been run to a critical part of the building. Without it, there was no way to get an occupancy permit. Big Daddy had assumed that either Barry or the electrician would handle it, but they hadn't included it in anyone's assignment. The electrical panel was deep in the kitchen. Running 120 volts to the main entrance meant going through the ceiling, a nearly impossible task. The decorative ceiling was already installed, so Barry would have had to either run metal conduit on the surface of the decorative wall or dismantle part of the ceiling, pull the cables, and then restore everything. The accessible restroom was easier. It was closer and the wiring could go through a drop ceiling. That wing also had offices and storage areas with regular tiled ceilings, unlike the 6-meter high ceilings in the main hall. The electrician quoted GC a fat sum for the extra work. Remember the accessible restroom? During a preliminary inspection, the building inspector found the usable space too small after accounting for the inward opening door. Rebuilding the restroom, moving walls, and relocating plumbing would be expensive and time-consuming. GC decided to simply reverse the door swing so it opened outward into the corridor. This had terrible consequences for restaurant operations. Every time someone used the restroom, the door blocked waiters moving food between the kitchen and dining room. People, even those without disabilities, often chose this restroom because it was the closest. A few days later, after discovering that the entrance doors needed 120 volts power, GC called Barry. The power was now connected, so Barry went to the site with a technician. A heater called an air curtain had been installed at the main entrance, a massive device blowing hot air to keep cold air out. GC had connected the 120 volts to the same circuit as the heater. Barry explained that according to the tender, each door operator needed its own dedicated line. GC didn't care and said, "Just hook these things up." Barry connected them and got GC's signature on a new acceptance certificate. This time, in fine print, it explicitly stated that lack of a dedicated line voided all warranties and any work would be billed separately. GC didn't read it, just signed and left. As usual, these operators are extremely sensitive to power quality. Each has a motor controlled by a board regulating door opening speed, hold time, closing speed, and force. Any voltage spike can destroy the board, blow a fuse, and damage components. A replacement board costs about $30, with half an hour to repair and another half hour to test. Barry had even sent one of his technicians for manufacturer training to become certified in board repairs. Normally, they'd just ship the broken board back and order a new one. A couple of days later, GC panicked. The final inspection for occupancy was tomorrow, and one entrance operator wasn't working. GC, your damn operator isn't working. Fix it immediately. Barry, fine, but this isn't covered by warranty. You didn't provide a dedicated line. GC, it's been less than a week. That's warranty. Barry, nope, guaranteed voided. You want a new operator? You'll pay, or I have a certified refurbished board ready for 80% of a new one. It will be installed by noon tomorrow. Which do you choose? Barry knew GC and Big Daddy were trying to cheat him again, just like last time. Every call GC made had been recorded. Remember the notice about calls being recorded for quality assurance? Barry had never had to use it. Until now, Barry's phone never initiated calls. Every incoming call from GC was recorded and saved. Of course, a few days later, one of the door operators failed again. Barry called GC to confirm if he was satisfied with the refurbished board. After getting confirmation, Barry removed the burnt board, installed the refurbished one, and took the faulty board back to the workshop for repair. A new control board cost $750. Barry billed $600 for the refurbished one. The repair itself cost a maximum of $75, and per tender rules, out of warranty work was 1 to 5 hour with a minimum of 4 hours 500 for labor alone. Installation and calibration took at least 45 minutes. Each repair brought Barry around $1,100 in the first 2 months. There were 27 board replacements. Every call was initiated by GC personally, and Barry received oral approval for each. If someone from the restaurant called instead, they were redirected to GC and told that service would only happen at his direct request. Then, GC's father, the main boss at Big Daddy, called. Father of GC, "Why the hell are we billed almost 30 grand?" Barry explained, and a meeting was scheduled. Barry met with his lawyer with all signed acts and detailed recordings of conversations with GC. It quickly became clear that GC had screwed up big time, while Barry had everything documented perfectly. The Big Daddy boss drilled GC with a look and told Barry, "If you want your money, you'll have to sue." Barry smiled and laid down his ace, the mechanics lien against Big Daddy Restaurants and MI Realty, the building owner. This legal tool allows contractors or subcontractors to claim against a property if the owner hasn't paid for completed work. Here's the kicker. The restaurant belonged to the internationally famous chef Mish, who convinces high-profile investors to fund new restaurants. The place has become top tier, investors sell and profit, and Mish earns a cut for lending his name. But now the restaurant couldn't be sold due to the lien. The investors' lawyers went wild. They weren't dealing with just any lawyer. They were about to clash with Barry's level of legal precision. Barry had taken his revenge perfectly. He then officially suspended service of the door operators due to the unpaid invoice. His company was the only authorized installer and service provider for this brand in the region, with exclusive rights from the manufacturer. All other companies in the area had been warned. When Big Daddy tried to call the manufacturer directly, they referred him back to Barry. Barry would absolutely get his payment. By standard procedure, 10% of the payment to the construction company is retained for a year, enough to cover the full invoice. The restaurant would pay Barry, then deduct it from Big Daddy, or they could sue and be forced to settle the debts in full. Meanwhile, Barry's competitors were left in the lurch. Big Daddy may have tried to hire someone else for service, but Barry's friends in the industry were warned, ensuring his control. Some competitors might have been used, and Barry's moves effectively punished anyone undercutting him. Think about it, with decades of experience, Barry probably knew from the start that none of the tenders included 120 volts power, the restroom didn't meet codes, and GC, famous for cutting corners, would connect the door operators to the rear curtain. Barry's master plan played out perfectly. This was professional revenge at its finest. My wife cheated on me with my business partner and left me for him, but later she faced a big disappointment. My ex-wife, Katie, 38, and I had been together for 19 years, 16 of those married. We also have a 14-year-old daughter. About 6 months ago, she left me to be with my business partner, well, now ex-partner, because he sold his share and quit after I found out about their affair. Lian used to be my colleague, and over time we became good friends, so we decided to quit our jobs and start our own company. We worked together for 5 years, and for 3 of those, he had been sleeping with my wife. I found out about it 6 months ago from Katie's phone messages. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She admitted everything and said she was tired of hiding it. She told me she had long wanted to leave me. I was devastated. I had no idea she was unhappy in our marriage. If I had known, I would have done anything to fix it. The day I exposed her, she said she was leaving, but I still offered to try to make it work. A stupid move, but I was desperate. She became irritated and said she had only married me because she got pregnant by accident and didn't want to be alone. She claimed she had tried to love me for all those 16 years but couldn't, and now she had found a man she truly loved. She told me not to keep her locked up and that I should just accept it. It was incredibly painful, especially because of our daughter, but Katie didn't hesitate before leaving. She filed for divorce, asked for no alimony, and our asset split was fair. Within a couple of months, it was finalized. By that time, I had come to my senses and realized I couldn't be with her after what happened. I spoke to Lian, and he just apologized, saying he had wanted to tell me for a long time but didn't know how. A couple of weeks later, he quit and said they were moving away, partly because they didn't want to cause me problems, and partly because Katie had been offered a great job in Boston. His cousin also lived there, so he could work with him. He wrote all this in a letter, and I never spoke to either of them again. The last time I saw Katie was 2 months ago, on the day our divorce was finalized. It was hard for my daughter and me, but we managed. At least I still had the business to focus on. I wanted to give my daughter the future she deserved. Then, about a week ago, Katie suddenly showed up again, and I'm still not sure if my daughter and I reacted the right way. It was around PM, someone was banging on the door and ringing the bell non-stop. My daughter was already asleep, and I was finishing work in my office. We both rushed to the door, and when I looked through the window, I saw it was Katie. My daughter asked me not to open it. She's still very hurt by her mother. Even though Katie has partial custody, she hasn't made a single attempt to reconnect, and after the cheating, my daughter's attitude toward her only got worse, but I figured if Katie came at that hour, it must be serious. I opened the door, but instead of coming in, she immediately started yelling that she would sue me and take everything she was owed. She shouted that she couldn't believe I had chosen to punish her so cruelly. At first, I had no idea what she was talking about. I asked her to calm down and explain. She accused me of deliberately not telling her about Lian's true nature to get back at her for the affair. Then she rolled up her sleeve to show me a spot on her arm with a bandage. I instantly understood that Lian must have done something, which shocked me. I had worked with him for years and never once saw him raise his voice at anyone. Katie explained that since moving to Boston, they had been constantly fighting. She thought he was just adjusting to the new life, but after a month, he was still acting like it was all her fault. He kept blaming her for ruining his life, making him leave the business. forcing him to work for a cousin who belittled him and telling me about their affair before he was ready. They fought every night. During one argument, he finally snapped and threw a vase at her. She tried to dodge it, but it still hit her arm and cut her. Before that, it was only verbal insults. Now it had escalated. She left the house immediately and got the next flight to see me. Leon didn't even try to contact or apologize afterward. She told me it was all my fault, that I must have known about his aggression and kept it secret to punish her. She claimed it was cruel since she had done me a favor by asking for nothing in the divorce, and I hadn't bothered to protect her. That was absurd. Yes, I had worked with Leon for years, but only in a professional setting. I didn't know what he was like in relationships. I'd only met the women he dated a couple of times. I had no way of knowing this side of him. Her accusations were nonsense, and it infuriated me that she acted like I owed her anything. I told her I had no idea and that I was sorry for what happened, but in the end, she had put herself in that situation. She could threaten me with court, all she wanted, but deep down she knew I had nothing to do with it. My daughter had been standing by the door the whole time, and I'd almost forgotten she was there because I was so caught up in the argument. When the conversation started going in circles, my daughter interrupted and told Katie to leave. I was surprised she spoke up apparently. Katie was too, but then Katie snapped at her to shut up and mind her own business because she was too young to understand and ordered her to go to bed. My daughter refused. She stood her ground and told Katie she had no right to speak to me like that, especially after everything she had done to me. She reminded her that I had been broken. For months after the affair, while Katie selfishly moved on with her new life. She also reminded her that she hadn't even tried to visit or keep in touch because she was too busy with Leon. Then my daughter told Katie she had failed both as a wife and as a mother, and she had no right to stand there acting like a victim. In a situation she had created herself. My daughter is only 14, but after hearing all this, I truly realized just how much she has matured because of the divorce. Katie had nothing to say in response, and then my daughter delivered her final words. Since Katie left and is now with Leon, she should deal with everything happening to her on her own because we are no longer her family. She dug her own grave, so now she can lie in it. That's exactly what she deserves for ruining the lives of the people closest to her. After saying that, my daughter slammed the door in Katie's face and went to her room. I heard Katie crying outside, but I didn't even go to check on her after everything that happened between us. There was no need. I just went to bed and tried not to think about it over the next couple of days, focusing on work. I was very proud of my daughter for taking my side and not letting me break down in front of Katie. After that visit, things seemed to be going fine until 3 days ago when Katie showed up again, this time with a lawyer demanding full custody of our daughter. Thankfully, my daughter was with her friends that evening, so I didn't have to tell her anything yet. But I was furious when Katie said that after the way my daughter spoke to her last time, she had decided she would no longer allow her to live with me. She claimed that the real reason she didn't try to maintain contact with our daughter after I found out about the affair was because she didn't want to get dragged into a long custody battle and make my life even harder. She said she wanted to leave quietly and not try to contact our daughter because she supposedly knew I was on edge back then, and her involvement in our daughter's life would have only made things worse. So basically, she was trying to say that she did all this for me, and not just because she wanted to run away from responsibility. Naturally, I didn't believe her and told her straight out, I know perfectly well that the only reason you didn't fight for anything during the divorce, especially custody, was because you wanted to leave as quickly as possible and start a new life with Leon. It had nothing to do with me, no matter how you try to spin it. I have nothing to feel guilty about, but Katie said she didn't care what I thought because now she wanted full custody of our daughter and she was determined to get it. She said she wouldn't let me destroy our daughter's perception of her mother by filling her head with nonsense and disrespect toward her. According to her, during our last meeting, our daughter behaved in an extremely disrespectful way toward her, and instead of intervening, I encouraged it. So now she knew what to do and came to tell me she would be taking me to court. I just said, go right ahead, and slammed the door because I didn't want to talk to her or waste any more of my time. But now I'm starting to wonder, what if she's right about something? I want to believe I'm doing the right thing, but honestly, right now, I'm not sure about anything anymore. Update 1, I've decided I have absolutely nothing to apologize for. My daughter did exactly the right thing by taking my side, and the comments helped me realize how foolish I had been acting. Katie cheated on me. I don't think I owe her either sympathy or pity for what's happened to her. Many people in the comments suggested I should talk to my daughter in advance in case Katie decides to go for full custody, so it wouldn't come as a shock to her, especially after our last encounter. So yesterday I talked to my daughter and told her everything. I didn't want to hide anything from her. She has already proven she's mature enough to handle it. Yes, I do feel a little sad that she had to grow up so quickly, but at least now I can prepare her for what's ahead. So far, we haven't heard anything from Katie, but we're expecting that to change soon. My daughter is 14, and that's old enough for her opinion to be taken into account in court if it even gets that far. It would be better to resolve everything through mediation, but just in case, I wanted to make sure. She truly wanted to stay with me, and she obviously does. She made it crystal clear she doesn't want anything to do with Katie, at least for now. She said that maybe in the future she'll think about reconnecting with her mother, but right now the pain is too fresh. She clearly blames her mother for destroying our family, and I can't deny that. I don't want to be the kind of father who turns a child against their mother out of spite, but in this case, I really didn't have to do anything. Katie managed that herself. Now my daughter just doesn't want to talk to her, even though they used to be quite close. This is a sharp and painful break for my daughter. It's clear Katie is angry that my daughter is on my side, especially since she always tried to be closer to her. By the way, many people asked who told my daughter about the affair. Well, it wasn't me, it was Katie herself. She wrote about it in a letter to our daughter just a couple of days after moving out, without even asking me if I agreed to that. My daughter was very upset when she learned the truth, but despite everything, she still wanted to talk to her mother at least once. But it was Katie who refused. When I tried to contact her to tell her our daughter wanted to talk and discuss what had happened, Katie said she didn't want to because she was too busy with the divorce process, and besides, she thought it wasn't something worth discussing. Everything she wanted to say was in that letter, and she supposedly had nothing to add. I tried to convince her to have at least one conversation with our daughter because it was clear she had a lot of questions. But Katie was adamant. After that, she cut off contact with us completely. So my daughter's view of her mother changed dramatically, and in my opinion, it's unfair for Katie to blame me for that. In any case, I spoke with my lawyer and we will be ready. Update 2: a couple of days ago, I finally received the summons from Katie regarding full custody. My lawyer and I immediately filed a response. Tomorrow, we have a court-appointed mediation meeting scheduled. Today, I got a call from Leon. I was pretty surprised. We had no reason to talk, but I answered anyway. As soon as I picked up, he said he wanted me to give Katie back to him. He told me he'd been trying to reach her for the past couple of days and was sure she must be with me, or at least had spoken to me. He wanted me to tell her that he was looking for her. I told him I didn't know where she was living now, but yes, we had spoken in the last few days, and she was here to fight for custody of our daughter. I didn't say this for Leon's sake. My thought was, what if talking to him could make her change her mind and convince her to come back to him? Ideally, maybe he could even persuade her to give up her parental rights altogether. With that in mind, I told him everything. I also added that she had been very upset that he hadn't tried to contact her after that night, and if he really wanted her back, he should hurry. Poor guy didn't even suspect they were manipulating him, so everything worked out quite well. I just hoped that Kathy still wanted to be with him and that when he showed up, she would decide to go back to him. I told my lawyer about this plan, and even he thinks I did the right thing because, although the situation was already turning in our favor, saving time and nerves never hurts, especially if it helps settle the case before trial. Update 3. So, 2 days ago, Kathy and I had our first mediation session, and of course, nothing went according to plan. She didn't agree to any of our terms and said it was all a waste of time. Then she ended the meeting in less than half an hour. After she left, I picked up my daughter from school, and when we got home, Leon was already waiting on the porch. He looked absolutely awful, and I could easily imagine how he got to such a state after a couple of months with Kathy. I told him to leave because my daughter and I had just come home and wanted to relax. We had neither the strength nor the desire to deal with another drama. I had already done everything I could for him. I wasn't going to go out of my way for a guy who was messing around with my wife behind my back, but he just broke down crying and said that after their last fight, Kathy hadn't replied to a single message from him and he didn't know where to find her. I told him I still didn't know where she lived and couldn't help. He just sat on the porch steps and cried, covering his face with his hands. At that moment, all this drama really started to annoy me. This guy, together with Kathy, destroyed my life, and now he feels comfortable enough to ask me to help him find her so they can make up. I told my daughter to go inside so I could deal with this myself. When she left, I told Leon it was time for him to go because I was fed up with both of them. Just in case, I gave him Kathy's parents' contacts and said if he couldn't reach her, he should call them and leave us alone. I told him that he and Kathy had ruined my life and I didn't want to see him hanging around my house anymore. He tried to apologize and said he didn't want to hurt me but had fallen in love with her and couldn't help himself. I didn't want to hear it, didn't say anything, and he left. I constantly feel lost and don't understand what's happening in my life. I truly hope and pray that Leon and Kathy can sort things out, because if they do, maybe they'll finally leave me and my daughter alone and I can start living peacefully again. At the moment, I don't understand what's going on, or what I feel, mostly nothing. I can't wait for all this to finally end. Update 4. A couple of days ago, Kathy officially ended our mediation sessions and said she wants the case to go to court. That's going to end badly for her, and we all know it, but apparently it's only now starting to sink in for her. Anyway, a few hours ago she came to me with Leon. It seems they managed to work things out between themselves. I didn't let her in because my daughter was home and feeling unwell, and I didn't want to make it worse, so I told them to wait at a nearby CAF. I called my mum to sit with my daughter, and I went to them. When I arrived, Kathy and Leon apologized for everything they put me through, and again, I had to explain that I didn't care anymore. I just want them to go their own way and get to the point. Why did they even call me? I wasn't going to waste time on fake apologies and nonsense. So they got to the point, they admitted they messed up and realized they really don't like Boston. Kathy missed our daughter a lot, and Leon missed feeling like he was his own boss. Now Kathy wanted me to agree to let our daughter visit her every weekend, or at least every other weekend, because she doesn't want to lose the life she had. Leon pulled off a real surprise. He wants to become my business partner again and open a branch in Boston. The best part is that they want me to decide within a couple of days, because Kathy and her employers said that if she wants to keep her job, she needs to go back to remote work. She can't continue otherwise. Even if I wanted to think about it, I wouldn't have time. So I just said no to all of it. Leon already quit and sold his share, so I wasn't going to take him back. I don't trust him at all. Kathy's proposal is just absurd. Our daughter shouldn't be shuttled back and forth every weekend just to see her mother. That should have been thought through before moving to Boston. This is not my fault at all. They started arguing with me, saying they were ready to compromise because they didn't want to take it to court. I told them that the very thought that they might achieve something and even win in court sounds ridiculous. The only reason they came to negotiate with me in person was to try to pressure me. Unfortunately for them, I'm not weak or stupid enough to fall for that. The only reason I agreed to meet was that I wanted to put an end to this whole story. My words immediately cooled their ardor, because even they understood that if it went to court, they didn't stand a chance. I said the most I could do was talk to my daughter and try to convince her to at least meet with her mother when she visits. But that's it, nothing more. So either they accept my offer or they can get lost. I'm done wasting my time on them. Kathy looked pretty desperate and quickly agreed. I left and will talk to my daughter when she feels better, but I'm not going to force her to do what she doesn't want. If she decides she doesn't want to see her mother anymore, that will be her decision. I definitely won't try to convince her otherwise. Update 5. Hey, a couple of months have passed. In the last update, I said I wasn't going to force my daughter to meet her mother if she didn't want to. After that update, I talked to my daughter, told her what Kathy said, and she replied that she needed some time to think it over. I passed that info to Kathy a couple of months ago, and since then we haven't spoken. I don't know if she and Leon managed to fix their issues, honestly. I don't care. But as far as I know, they're still together and living in Boston. Well, let them live. The main thing is they left me alone, and now I can finally try to build my life anew. That's exactly what I'm doing now. The best revenge is to live well. So I'm just focused on work and on raising my daughter to be a good person, not like her mother. I hope I succeed.